Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show, the best damn morning show that you can have. Let me check this mic. This sounds very hot. Well, mic is fine. All right, excellent. I hope you guys are doing okay this morning. Excuse me. Clear my throat. Get that straight. I hope you guys are doing all right. Best damn morning show in the morning. Obviously, because it's a morning show, right? I'm glad that you guys could join me this morning. We do hard news and politics day in, day out, Monday through Friday. That is what we do. That is what we talk about, international and domestic. I think my audience prefers international, if I'm being bluntly honest with you, if I'm looking at the views. Either way, I'm glad you guys can join me. From my point of view, people need to eat their peas. And so I still do those shows, even if it gets one view. Good show for you today. Excellent show for you today. Patrick Henningsen is coming on. Arnaud is going to be on. We also have Daniel McAdams. All of these people are fantastic. All of them knows their craft. And so we are going to have really good conversations. We are in the middle, doesn't quite seem like it, of a constitutional crisis. Now, what do I mean by constitutional crisis? What I mean by that is we have three branches of government: courts, executive branch, and congressional branch. These three branches make up our government. It's almost like competing powers going at each other. But ideally, they're supposed to balance each other. And this balance is supposed to be on some level respected, where at the very least we've developed a sense where the courts are the rule keepers. And you kind of need somebody to keep the rules to call balls and strikes, because the executive branch can get into the fight with the congressional branch or vice versa. And there needs to be this kind of, okay, who's right based on what we consider to be the law. The Supreme Court is heavily biased in the conservative sense. And don't give me this nonsense about the court being apolitical. The court is not apolitical. You wouldn't fight so hard, or there would be these hard fights in regards to the presidency. And what do Democrats say every year? Hey, I know the Democrats aren't going to do anything for you, but at least you can choose the court. Meaning, it's the value of the office, and the political party that chooses that office matters in the way. I mean, otherwise, why would they fight so hard, and why would they use that as an argument? How these people go, meaning Democrat or Republican, they are not going to choose a Republican or somebody who leans Republican on the court if you're a Democrat, and vice versa. The court is not apolitical. Nobody can tell me that Scalia was apolitical. Nobody can tell me that John Roberts is apolitical. Nobody can tell me that Sotomayor is apolitical. These people have a political ideology that informs their judicial opinions. So it is a fascinating thing when all 9 justices come up with a ruling and the president blows it off. Blows it off. Now, what I'm talking about is this case right here. If I can pull this up. There we are. Kilmar Garcia. Kilmar Garcia, this gentleman, was deported by a quote-unquote mistake. He was legally supposed to be in the country. There was a ruling, if I'm not mistaken, in 2019 saying that he was supposed to stay in the country because of political prosecution or persecution if he goes back to El Salvador. And Trump deported him anyway. All 9 justices says, bring him back. Bring him back. He wasn't supposed to go. Bring him back. Trump is sitting here with Bukele. Bukele's claim to fame is throwing people in prison in these hellish prisons in El Salvador. And in these hellish prisons in El Salvador that Bukele effectively disappears people into. And there's, by the way, all sorts of gray area in the Bukele thing. Come to find out that Bukele was effectively working with the gangs, not just prosecuting, working with the gangs and getting political kickbacks from those gangs in order to get into power, or for that matter, to stay in power. When he was here hamming it up with Trump, listen to this.
Well, Mr. President, you said that if the Supreme...
One second, real quick. Let me do this first. Listen to what is said here. Bukele and Trump. I have two clips on this. We're going to go into this later with Daniel McAdams because I know he's going to have a lot to say about this. But listen to what is said here when they're having a conversation. Reporters are asking him, the courts told you to bring him back. Are you going to do it? Listen to the conversation.
Supreme Court said someone needed to be returned, that you would abide by that. You said that on Air Force One just a few days ago. And they said that it must be facilitated.
Why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country? Why can't you just say that? Why do you go over and over? And that's why nobody watches you anymore. You know, you have no credibility. Please go ahead.
President Trump. Well, Mr. President, you said that.
This first clip. Hey, the Supreme Court that is heavily biased in your favor sides 9-0 that you're supposed to bring the guy back. Are you going to bring the guy back? And Trump's response is to deride the reporter and to say, hey, why can't you say we're just keeping criminals out of the country? Well, again, there's been no delineation to show that he's a criminal. That's your definition of it. In the same way that George Bush declared this is not torture. This was enhanced interrogation. This is just playing around with words. Here's another clip. Bukele himself, when asked, are you going to bring him back into the country? This is what Bukele says. He has something very similar, sentiment to Trump. Right here.
¿Usted lo liberaría, Presidente Bukele? Can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm suppose you're not suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right?
It's always
how can I return him to the United States? Like, could I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, I mean, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
So you could release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing. I mean, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. I mean, we just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, released into
I mean, there's a fascination.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They're sick. These are sick people.
Yeah, they're the sick people. They're the sick people. Oh, they're the sick people. So the notion of due process apparently doesn't matter. The notion of what the Supreme Court dictates doesn't matter. And again, 9-0 wasn't even close. You couldn't say, well, the liberals are pushing for, no, 9-0. There's a thing in this country called due process, that even if a person is guilty, if you catch a guy murdering somebody on the subway, that person still has due process. They still have lawyers. They still have representation. They still have to go through the courts in order for the courts to make a decision on A or B or whether the person is guilty or innocent. That is just our laws. And for whatever particular reason, Donald Trump has been able to disappear people into a foreign country in a very similar way that George Bush was able to disappear people into Guantanamo Bay. This also goes to the whole real ID stuff that was effectively a Patriot Act law that they are now reinvigorated and is now applying to the American public. This, by definition, is a constitutional crisis. And the catch becomes, how is this resolved? The Supreme Court came back and said the lower court's ruling was correct. The lower court said, bring him back. Not just bring him back, give us daily the steps that you're using effectively to bring him back. And the Trump administration has effectively blown it off. Now, here's the catch. The court doesn't have a military. The court doesn't have a police force. So what powers at the end of the day does the court have, short of this kind of historical precedent of having a court make these determinations and these decisions? And if Trump blows it off, what can the Supreme Court do? Now, one of the things that the person pointed out, or the lawyers for Garcia pointed out, they need to start holding people in contempt. Agreed. And the catch becomes, the moment that you hold people in contempt, does that change anything? And does that fix, update? Will that compel people to move forward any faster maybe the courts need to start putting people in jail. How about that? I guess my point is, at the end of the day, the president, the executive branch, has just blown off the judicial branch, a branch that has every right to make a determination about what is supposed to happen in matters like this. This is pretty outrageous by the Trump administration to just say, we don't care what the Supreme Court says. And just because you vocally say, we will follow the law and we will follow what the Supreme Court says, doesn't mean that you're actually doing it. Also, Trump, in the argument, the reason why Bukele keeps saying terrorists, is because Donald Trump has defined MS-13 as a terrorist organization. Okay. And then he says, Garcia is part of MS-13. So by definition, he is a terrorist according to Donald Trump and according only to Donald Trump. What's wild about this, I remember Eric Holder. When Eric Holder, do you remember when the Obama administration murdered that American? Oh, what is his name? Oh, I can't think of his name. It'll come to me in a moment. Obama didn't just murder the dad, he also murdered his kids. Now, what Eric Holder argued at the time was that these things can be decided not just by the judicial branch, but also by the executive branch. And at the time, I was like, wait a minute. You seem to be fundamentally misunderstanding the roles and powers of these different offices. The notion that the executive branch can make a determination on whether or not somebody is guilty, that is an American citizen, murder that American citizen, and then argue that the executive branch also has judicial function is pretty outrageous. I am consistent on this when I look at this and say, well, this is outrageous. You're blowing off the Supreme Court. Not just blowing off the Supreme Court, you're making determinations that are foundationally court-based and judicial-based. Meaning this notion that you've ignored this person's judicial or due process is astonishing, utterly and entirely astonishing. And if you could do that to somebody like this, you could do it to anybody. You can easily make a determination that person's a terrorist. And now I can do whatever I want to do to that person. Richard Medhurst, do you remember when he was in, I believe, Austria, if I'm not mistaken? And they said, you are Hamas. And because you're Hamas, you effectively have no rights. That is not a good precedent. That is not something that we should be doing here in the United States, a country that's supposed to be under law, and that each of us are supposed to be protected by those laws. And even if a person is not necessarily from here, they still get due process under law. This notion that the executive branch can just blow it off, wave it away with a swipe of his hand is pretty amazing. And when you ask, is there anything that anybody else can do about it? The answer, silence. Silence. Hakeem Jeffries was asked, by the way, hey, Hakeem Jeffries, you're ostensibly the leader of the Democratic Party. And as leader of the Democratic Party, is there anything you could do about the fact that the president has disappeared somebody illegally? Hakeem Jeffries' response to it was effectively, well, I'll just let you hear his response. Leader of the Democratic Party, hey, Hakeem, what can you do about the fact that the president has just disappeared someone? This is Hakeem Jeffries' answer. Let me make sure you can see it. Okay, good. This is Hakeem Jeffries.
What, if any, power, for people who are watching at home, do you have? What power do you have and other Democratic members to compel, push the government to bring him home?
Well, we have the power to shape public sentiment, and at the end of the day, making sure that public sentiment in this case understands that the treatment of Mr. Abrego Garcia, is unconscionable, unacceptable, and un-American. And if it can happen here, it can happen anywhere. And it's going to be incredibly important for every member of Congress. Certainly, we plan to do this on the Democratic side, both in the House and in the Senate, to intensify the pressure on the Trump administration.
I'll stop right there. None. None. No powers. Hakeem Jeffries has the charisma of a damp rag. And if it's up to him to change public sentiment, then public sentiment is not going to change at all. It is outrageous that the US government, the president of the United States, has made the decision that due process doesn't matter. And even when a court says, go back and get him and bring him back here, the response of the president is, he's a terrorist. They look at Bukele. Well, I can't let a terrorist back into the country, so what am I going to do? He has effectively been disappeared every bit as much as people were being disappeared in Guantanamo Bay. This is astonishing. I'm going to bring on my guests. I am joined, if I can pull this up, there we are. I'm joined with Patrick Henningsen. There he is. My man, how you doing today? You doing okay this morning?
Yeah, very well, Jamal. Great to be with you.
Oh man, it's great to have you. Patrick Henningsen, he's a geopolitical analyst, journalist, and host of SundayWire.com, critic of mainstream media's propaganda, and also 21st Century Wire. He writes for another great outlet. I've been paying far more attention to that outlet recently. Patrick, man, thank you for joining me, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to be with you. Thanks.
Do you want to start there? I made the point of saying this is a constitutional crisis, that all things being equal, the president of the United States has effectively disappeared somebody outside of the country, ignoring all notion of due process. And even when the Supreme Court has effectively told him, bring him back, 9-0, a conservative Supreme Court that is heavily biased towards Donald Trump and Donald Trump's wife. Keep in mind, this is the same court that effectively said Donald Trump was a king. That court effectively confirmed, the lower court, or affirmed, I should say, the lower court's ruling that you need to bring it back. The lower court even pointed out, you need to tell us day by day what you are doing in order to bring him back. And for whatever reason, Donald Trump, his point of view is, he's a terrorist. I put him out the country. We can't get him back now because Bukele said we can't bring him back. That's astonishing.
Yeah, well, there's no evidence that he's a terrorist. That's number one. So that's libel, defamation, just malicious defamation. But that's par for the course for this administration, unfortunately. Anybody they don't like or anybody they don't like the look of or is a terrorist, basically. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but it's sort of where we're at with Marco Rubio, Trump, and the rest. The Mahmoud Khalil case. As well. Then the question is what his legal status in the U.S. So the United States government or the Trump administration saying he's an illegal, he's a terrorist, shouldn't be in the country anyway. Okay, so the courts are saying, and what I want to get your obviously position on that point, his legality, Jamal. Can you confirm?
So in 2019, the court effectively said he is supposed to stay in the country because he was like a political prisoner or something, not a political prisoner, but for political reasons, he was supposed to stay in the United States. He was not supposed to be deported to El Salvador. And so when Trump deported him, Trump says, well, this was an administrative mistake. So the White House acknowledges this was a mistake. And yet when they're like, bring him back, he's like, he's a terrorist, can't do it. He's part of MS-13. It's like, okay, but you've acknowledged that your deportation of him was a mistake and ran afoul of the court order. Just outrageous. And the Mahmoud case is another one like that, where he's a green card holder.
Legal resident, married to a U.S. citizen with child.
With a child.
So he has standing, he has. And so I think the point, Jamal, is due process. That if this government is avoiding due process or discarding or doing runaround due process, this is exactly the same exact grievances that Trump waged against the Biden administration, that they were careless and avoiding due process and avoiding the rule of law and so forth, and making the law up as they go along. That's what the Democrats would do. So this is what Donald Trump is doing with his executive power. And this is the problem, is when the executive branch Democrat or Republican, when the executive branch accumulates power in one branch, in the executive, one branch of government, the subsequent administrations do not relinquish that power from the executive branch. So that's just a curve that's just gone up and up and up for the last, well, since Abraham Lincoln, probably, if you want to be completely clear on the length of that problem. But so Donald Trump is just basically continuing that. So, but here's the other problem is that, and this is where Obama went really wrong, and it's where Biden was a train wreck, is that when you start only governing for one part of the country or one constituent or one part of your base, and that's who you pander to all the time, then your presidency is going to lose legitimacy for the rest of the country. The goal of any Republican or Democrat, no matter who elected them or whatever, once they get in office, their goal is to establish the widest possible constituency, to govern for the most amount of people, to lead the country and not the, ethno-nationalist wing of their party or not their, extreme far-right MAGA base. Okay, that's not, you can't govern the United States of America like that. If you do, you're asking for two things to happen. One is you're going to inflame the opposition. You're also going to embolden the opposition as well. And you may definitely lose control of the House of Representatives in the midterms, okay? Because you're motivating the opposition by basically doing everything that you complained your predecessor did, but doing it even worse, like deporting people for their first, they're exercising their First Amendment. So on this case, this is taking it to another level. This is trying to shield your incompetence. Okay, so they made a mistake. They admitted they made a mistake, but they don't want to basically walk it back because they're embarrassed that they made a mistake. So this is a cover-up, but it's kind of done out in the open. It's almost like, F you, what are you going to do about it? We're in charge. Yeah, we said we made a mistake, but we've changed our mind this week. And this is like a repeated pattern, this inconsistency and this lack of principles and breaking your word, okay, which is what Trump is doing repeatedly, okay? And I can tell you from the conservative side, a lot of people are really close to, they've had it. I've spoken to many original MAGAs who voted for him in 2016, and they're looking for centrist Democrats that they can vote for. They're looking at other options because they've had it with Trump. He has broken every single promise. He's walked back or done a U-turn on every single principle that he promised to get the votes to get into office. And so he's doing it again. And so this abuse from the executive branch or the State Department, this can be deployed against anybody. Yes. Anybody who's perceived to be a political enemy or a threat to a narrative, just as bad as the Democrats. This is the woke right. This is the woke right on steroids, which if you look at that spectrum, you go too far on the woke right, you get full-blown fascism. That's exactly where that's where the needle lands on that spectrum. But people are they're still doing victory laps from the election. And there's serious things going on here. I mean, the lack of he is really hemorrhaging credibility. Okay. And this is, see, look, let's be honest. Okay. Foreign policy, Donald Trump is a disaster. It's a train wreck. Okay. Let's start with Gaza. Big L. Ceasefire. What ceasefire? No, that was never a ceasefire. It was a pause to rearm Israel. And look at what Netanyahu comes to Washington while he's bombing refugee tents, while he's slaughtering women and children with U.S. weapons. Big L for Donald. Ukraine. I'm going to end the war in 24 hours. That's how he got it. It's how he got the votes. He got the votes. And where are we on Ukraine? Big L. Steve Witkoff. L. Donald, you're racking up losses. You're racking up L's. So where you can win back some trust from your own electorate, there's people who live in America, is by adjudicating a situation like this honestly. And then what you're signaling to the opposition is, I'm not such an unreasonable guy. Yeah, we make mistakes. Government makes mistakes, but we'll row it back and we'll fix it. Because we're all about fairness. We're all about due process. We're all about the U.S. Constitution. We're not about abusing executive power like your predecessor, Joe Biden, or like Barack Obama did. Okay, you're different. You're supposed to be different, but you're not. And where are we on Greenland? That's a big L. Oh, Canada, 51st state, L. Tariffs. Oh, yeah, they're all going to be begging on their knees. China basically said, we're not blinking. And guess who blinks first? Donald Trump blinks first. L. L on tariffs. I remember when Trump said, we're going to win so much, you're going to be tired of winning. I've never seen so much a president rack up this many L's in the first 100 days of their administration. So Donald Trump made the mistake from Trump University 101 business course. Never overpromise and underdeliver. You're you get an F on your own business course, Donald. So I hate to be cruel and sound like I'm being hard, and I'm not an anti-Trumper, but this is getting stupid. This is getting ridiculous. So they're putting lipstick all over every pig in the sty. And they're trying to sell it like it's a win. Yeah. This is just totally delusional. And the Mahmoud Khalil case is the ultimate. That's going to end up going to be the biggest L for Rubio, for Trump. I give Marco Rubio 12 months. He won't be in his position. He'll be out by Christmas. And you know why? Because they're racking up so many L's that Trump will never take the blame for it. So he'll have to fire somebody. There'll have to be some. So he's going to start leaning on people. This is what Donald Trump does. When things aren't going well, he starts leaning on people and starts making, sidewinding comments against certain people in his cabinet in preparation for pushing them out. Mm-hmm. And that's what's going to someone's going to, it's Rubio, Waltz, maybe all of them. Elon's got like one foot out the door already. He's worn out his welcome with this vaudeville show that he's been doing with Doge and the sunglasses and the stupid hats. And they're just making kind of fools of themselves. And I'm just being honest. It's bad optics.
It's reality.
And the Iran thing. We're going to obliterate the country. He sends a letter to the supreme leader of the country. Talk about bad form, and then threatens to annihilate Iran if they don't come to the table and do a nuclear deal. We spoke about this before, the same deal Trump tore up, but he wants to add destroying their whole civilian nuclear energy program, plus their missile program. It's got a wide-ranging deal, and if you don't accept it, we're going to do a preemptive strike. And then we're going to dictate the terms of negotiations. Well, they just had their first round of talks, and Iran dictated the terms, the location, the intermediary, Oman, that was being used, not the U.S. The U.S. didn't ask for any of that. And guess what? Now the only thing on the table is the nuclear weapon. So all the other stuff that he piled on, so now we're back to the JCPOA. Yep. L. Another L. I've been getting tired of these L's, Donald. It's just one L after another. Like, how are you going to sell this one? Oh, we're gonna start World War III and annihilate a country of 80 million people if you don't give me what I want. And then to threaten China. If you know anything about Asia, and when you in business or Trump should know this. Losing face, you don't allow the other side to lose face. It's very important in Asia, especially Chinese culture. He caused them to lose face before negotiations. Did you expect that they were going to come timidly to the table and bargain with you? No, you made them lose face, so they basically gave you the finger in Chinese. And so the Trump caves on tariffs, mm-hmm. and then exempts all these high trafficked, high selling Chinese electronic goods. And that's just the beginning. He'll continue to cave. So what was that all about, other than him and all his buddies and donors shorting the market from February? They all made out like bandits on this. What about the Rust Belt? What about the Blue Dog Democrats? Where are the working class? The billionaires are supposed to be the champions of the working class. Isn't that how this MAGA goes? The billionaires are the champions of the working man. The Elon Musk is the working class hero, the richest man in the world. Isn't this how the narrative goes with MAGA? Where is the benefit to the working class? Where are all these jobs? When are they going to arrive on U.S. shores? 10 years? Donald Trump's not going to be around in 10 years.
Oh, Patrick, it's worse than that. Oh, it's worse than that. You said a few things, and I want to point out just a few. China has escalated, by the way. They haven't backed down. They haven't removed their tariffs. They haven't did any of that stuff. And instead of backing down, right here. So this is China deciding Boeing, they're halting all purchases of Boeing flights on top of everything else. So right here, China orders the airlines to stop ordering Boeing aircraft to halt purchases of American-made aviation parts. You go to this one, China halted all beef exports. Now, and by the way, this is on top of other items, such as no films coming from the United States, semiconductors, etc. So it's not just the 125% tariffs. China has gone down the list and increased one item after the next in regards to putting more and more pressure on the US. And this is going to hit cattle ranchers in the United States and the Rust Belt, as you pointed out. The aviation thing is going to hit pretty much everybody else. And to make this even worse, right here, this is the number of countries in Europe that were touring in the United States. Look at the tourism. It just dropped. It just plummeted. All of Europe going straight down in the toilet. And as you point out, tourism makes up 90% of the US GDP. To make it even worse, Donald Trump is going to impose 20% import tariffs on tomatoes, meaning pizzas going up. The amount that you're paying for pizzas is now going to go up. And he's talking about doing the same thing for pharmaceuticals. All of this stuff is going to directly hit the working man. Like he's saying 25% tariffs on pharmaceuticals. Okay, so that means that every pill that you buy, any and everything that you buy that is a medicine that is made outside of the United States, to which he says most of the medicines are made outside of the United States, we're going to get hit with a 25% increase in regards to the price. One last point before I go to this. Goldman Sachs has postulated that the GDP for the US is going to flatline, if not go into a recession right here. This is what they are now forecasting for the GDP of the US. Now, this number was supposed to be at 3%. Now, it's at 0. That's astonishing.
Zero growth.
Zero growth. All of this is based on his policies. This was not what they were postulating before, and it's a 3% growth. The economy looks great. Not anymore. Not anymore. So you are absolutely right. And you made a point about Witkoff. Oh, I'm glad you made the point about Witkoff. Here's a clip of Witkoff talking about now what they have decided to work on. And people are calling this effectively a capitulation, that Donald Trump has effectively capitulated to Iran.
It is
in the way
just
that they capitulated
this
to Russia.
message of peace through strength. It resonates throughout the world. This is not a threat on my part now. It is just a simple fact. The president means what he says, which is they cannot have a bomb. The conversation with the Iranians will be much about two critical points. One, enrichment. As you mentioned, they do not need to enrich past 3.67%. In some circumstances, they're at 60%. In other circumstances, 20%. That cannot be. And you do not need to run, as they claim, a civil nuclear program where you're enriching past 3.67%. So this is going to be much about verification on the enrichment program, and then ultimately verification on weaponization. That includes missiles, the type of missiles that they have stockpiled there, and it includes the trigger for a bomb.
This is just the JCPOA Part 2. That's all that is. JCPOA Part 2. And by the way, there's no, we don't even know if Iran would even accept that Like they're still in negotiations over this stuff. From my understanding, there was an envoy from Iran that went to Russia. They're having conversations with the Russians and the Chinese on how to effectively deal with it. It seems that they're working on this as a group or talking about this as a group. I don't take issue with that, by the way, meaning that's wrong. I take issue with the entire Iran narrative in and of itself. When Donald Trump has all of these Zionists that are in his administration, these guys are killing people left and right, invading one country after the next. Israel has nukes, and they turn around and say, Iran is the problem. Do you remember when George Bush came out and said, the only issue with Iran is Israel? And then apparently somebody told him, hey, stop saying that, in which case nobody now brings it up. So now everybody just acts as if we're doing this purely on our own steam, purely for our own reasons, as opposed to, hey, there's Israel paying people behind the scenes in order to kind of take a certain position, not to mention the US. It's a colony where we use them as our attack dog. It's fascinating. And you're absolutely right. All of these things are losses. Give me your take on this. I think we're at a tipping point. And what I mean by tipping point, the US and Europe together effectively pushed Ukraine into a war. Even back in 2008, when William Burns wrote the memo, net means net, they made it very clear. Russia is not going to tolerate you putting NATO into Ukraine. And yet they were still trying to do it anyway. The Minsk agreements was entirely supposed to prevent a war. All of them, well, at the very least, Angela Merkel, Hollande acknowledged that the entire point of the Minsk agreements was to give time for Ukraine to build up this massive military, again, on the border of Russia. So in one case, you have this test of strength that took place in Ukraine, where the West lost and continues to lose. And the longer it goes on, the weaker Ukrainian military gets, where it becomes clear at a certain point, they will buckle and they will fail. In another sense, you have Trump coming in trying to articulate this economic power, like we're the United States, we could take on the world in a trade war. And China tells them to F off, and not just F off, escalates, continuously escalates, even as Trump backs away from the hot stove and has to drop tariffs back down to 10% across the globe because of the bond markets freaking out. And even with China, when he tries to keep the 145% tariffs on China, he even has to back away from that, where I think it's like 3/4 of electronics that Donald Trump allowed into the country or removed the tariffs from come from China. China has not backed away from it at all. And not just backed away, they've continued to escalate on top of it. Trump is like, we don't understand why China doesn't call. They're not calling. They're not calling. This is pretty astonishing. And to your point about the MAGA thing, this is not what people voted for.
It's not, but it's also, it shows you how thin the veneer of the stage show, the World Wrestling Federation show that Donald Trump puts on. It's just so thin and shallow and lacks substance, because his whole brand is, I'm big, I'm tough, America's not going to be pushed around. They're ripping us off. They're ripping us off. It's enough. We're getting a bad deal. You know, it's just the whole shtick has just gotten so old. And what we see is Donald Trump caves at just even a little bit of pressure. He absolutely caves. Okay. If you look at, like, he's launched airstrikes on, at least publicly, he said, because of very spurious little things, like Ivanka, his daughter, was upset by the photos of Khan Shahun or wherever it was, or Duma. And so Trump had to launch a attack against this alleged chemical attack in Syria that is completely dubious. But anyway, that aside, then Idlib. Oh, this woman came up to me and she said, oh, the children of Idlib are going to die. You need to stop the counteroffensive. Save Al-Qaeda. Save HTS. And then he brags about how he saved Idlib from full of terrorists, by the way. He kept them alive and well, so they ended up getting into Damascus in December. So again, that was from some Syrian lobbyist. So he's easily pushed around by the Israelis. They own him, basically. He's literally lock, stock, owned by the Israeli lobby. I mean, let's just not kid ourselves. And then he appoints, as all his right hand and envoys are all hardcore Zionists and people like Steve Witkoff. And they basically said, oh, Witkoff put Netanyahu in his place. You remember all that? That's all staged theater back when he came in and was inaugurated. Steve Witkoff is not qualified to be a diplomat. He might be good at real estate deals and all the other sort of Wall Street chicanery these people get involved in, how they made their billions, okay? Maybe good at that. But when we're talking about international relations, treaties, war and peace, that's not the skill set. It's not the skill set. That the past presidents, the people they sent, you can make fun of Obama all you want, or even Bush, okay, or Clinton, but the types of people they had at state knew the whole history of Iran from its inception as a civilization. Knows every president in its history, knows every inch of any conflict that has happened in the vicinity of the meeting, knows it all, and their neighbors. Trump's team knows nothing. Wickoff doesn't even know the name of the Donbass regions. So if he doesn't care enough to study just the basic geography of the thing that you're negotiating over, you're not a serious person. You're not a serious negotiator. You might be a nice guy. You might be personable. I saw Steve Witkoff on Tucker. Seems like a nice guy. I'll have a beer with him. But I'm not going to send him to negotiate a nuclear deal. No way. Because he doesn't know what he's doing. He's winging it. These guys are winging it. They're not doing the homework. They're surrounded by sycophants. Some of them don't even have AIDS. They're completely winging it on their own. And they're trying to sell it like they're somehow in control and in charge. And they're quite obviously not. And so they're not even in the same weight class as people in the Carter administration or the Nixon administration before that, and so on and so forth. The caliber of people is it's amateur hour. It's like this is not the tri-state, doing a deal in a casino with the Teamsters and paying off the city planners. Guys, this is the game of nations.
Yeah.
You got to know what you're doing. You got to know who you're dealing with. And I think in this case, Iran has pulled a blinder by bringing the U.S. into negotiations. The U.S. plays checkers. Trump is a power checker player. Doesn't play chess. It's no 5D chess here, folks. It's checkers. It's power checkers. In the Middle East, they play chess and backgammon. Okay? Backgammon, the game swings massively on a dime and then swings back again and back again. That's the way their brains are wired. And they invented chess. Okay? The US invented checkers. Okay? So that's how we're dealing. And you know what's interesting? And goes back to the Scott Ritter controversy, is that this idea that the politics doesn't matter, that the political calculus isn't it's totally part of this. Okay? Because look at where we are. All these big threats, all this big front, and the USA, the powerful USA, caves like a cheap deck chair on the Titanic. Okay? Totally folded. Why? Because there's really only one single issue. The primary issue you're talking about here is about trust. And the U.S. lost the trust of Iran and the international community by pulling the rug out from under the JCPOA. And guess what? The best they're going to do in any subsequent follow-up negotiations is another JCPOA. That's the best they're going to do. But they'd be lucky to even get that because they've already burned their bridges. You can't front load a negotiation with threats of force. And again, this is my disagreement with people like Scott Ritter, because it doesn't follow any of the patterns of any modeling or case studies for any past negotiations, all the way from sanctions to arms deals. It just doesn't. There's no historical precedent for it. So, it might sound like I respect that's his opinion, that's his position, but it's not realistic because he's not taking the wider political environment into account. And guess what? The politics has spoken. Trump folded. Iran's now in the driving seat. Just like Trump caved in Ukraine and Russia's in the driving seat. Why? The U.S. can't be in the driving seat. It's so far. They dug themselves such a hole in the Middle East by tethering themselves to an anvil called Israel that's heading to the bottom of the Med, okay? And then in Russia, with Ukraine, tethering yourself to a regime in Kiev that is sinking like it's gone. You know, it's over. But they've got it on life support, pretending like there's something to negotiate there. I mean, it's hard to take these guys seriously. The tariff thing. Now, if we want to do look, I mean, I'm not an economist.
Yeah.
But I took economics at university level. I took statistics, and I understand modeling and basic stuff. And the reason Canada, like for instance, the trade war with Canada, the United States is saying, well, they're putting tariffs on our agricultural goods. Why would Canada do that? And again, I'm not an advisor to the president, right? But I haven't heard them say the basic bottom line on all this is Canada can't compete with the type of subsidies the United States government, the corporate welfare and subsidies that we lop on our big agribusiness.
Yes.
Paying people not to grow, or in the dairy industry, for instance. How can the Canadians compete against that? They can't have a zero tariff environment. They need some protection. They can't compete. Why? Because the US dollar, they're allowed to print US dollars, $2 trillion a year, deficit spending, and that pays for all that corporate welfare to fix and distort all the markets in agriculture, in dairy, in the chip industry. Here's a good one. This is a big F by Biden, and Trump just repeated it. The CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. Why they're building these? Oh, we're going to take over the semiconductor industry. Okay. And then they start playing hardball with China on chips, okay, to protect Intel. The Intel's government's going to pick the winner, just like General Motors with Obama. We're going to pick the winners and we're going to bail them out. So what happened with Intel? They got cute with China, and China said, fine, we're going to throttle Intel in the Chinese market. And guess what the biggest market for Intel is in the world? It's China. So they just shot themselves. Biden shot himself in the foot. I don't know if this was intentional, but Intel had to lay off thousands of people last year because of the contraction in sales. Are these people like stupid? I mean, where did they go to business school? Donald Trump says he's got a degree from Wharton. Did he go to class? I mean, did he learn anything there? Or did he just kind of sail through? These are basics. The pharma industry. The U.S., the pharma industry gets so much corporate welfare. So much. We picked up the tab for Moderna.
Yes.
You know, the U.S. government, all their R&D and all this garbage, junk products that Trump says are wonderful vaccines that weren't tested, they're not effective and not safe. And they get all this corporate welfare from the U.S. government because we can deficit spend because the dollar is the world reserve currency. No one's ripping off America. America's ripping everybody else off. He called a state of emergency for this tariff thing. Totally bogus. Like, oh, there's a trade deficit, so there's a state of emergency. We've had a trade deficit since 1934. So that's like the slowest burning emergency in the history of Earth. I mean, they're lying, and somehow the media or people are just. I think there's still people are in shock. They can't work out what's being done, so they don't know how to quite react to it. But the U.S. is ripping everybody off. The U.S. exports their fiat dollars in exchange for real material goods. We send our useless paper dollars that cost us nothing to make, but debt on us, the Americans, future debt. We pay in inflation at home, but we export those dollars and get finished goods back again. So we get cheap goods at Walmart. That's the U.S. economy. We're sending them our worthless dollars. They're holding our debt. They're buying our debt. They're buying our bonds, our T-bills. They're holding euro dollars in Europe, in Japan. And they're propping up the value of this dollar, keeping our economy from collapsing because we're running a global empire. And Trump's saying they're ripping us off. Absolute BS.
Don't forget the war. I mean, 20 trillion.
They're lying. They're lying. They're either lying or they don't even understand how the U.S. reserve global system, fiat system works. Wow. And if the people in charge of America don't understand that, really, then we have a real big problem. Like we got people in government that don't know how the country, don't know how American empire works. And they're selling this alternative narrative like we're tired of being ripped off and this is garbage. It's absolutely retarded. I don't know. There's nothing nice you can say about this.
Yeah.
And there's no secret 5D chess plan that Trump's got in his back pocket that's going to make it all good. It's not happening. Wake up, people. So, I mean, if I judge the comments on foreign policy and see the complete incompetence and the complete disingenuous, totally bonkers statements made by Trump about, Israel used to own Gaza, but he gave it away. The last leader, Netanyahu, wouldn't have given it away. It's going to make great real estate. When someone's making that level of an incompetent statement, then I'm going to question that they might have problems and competency in other areas like macroeconomics.
Yeah.
So we got a serious problem here. The game, the fun and games, the honeymoon's over. Okay, this government is very unstable in what they're saying and what they're doing, and
you're 1,000% correct. That you're not being mean. You're being, reality. It's just reality, right? Like at the point where Trump is about to crash the economy under this notion of I'm going to use tariffs, missing the fact that people need drugs. Like the cost of drugs, Europeans may not realize this. The amount that we pay for drugs in the United States, the amount we pay for medicine in the United States is dramatically higher than pretty much anywhere else in the world for worse outcomes. If Donald Trump is going to put 25% on pharmaceuticals, that means those drugs are going to go up that much higher. Like that stuff is hitting us. And he may not care because he's a billionaire. Elon Musk may not care because he's the richest man on the planet. Everybody else cares. And you brought up Doge. The notion that they're trying to save $1 trillion and then put $20 trillion on the debt over the next 10 years is mind-blowing. Because that's what they're doing with the budget. That's exactly what they're trying to do with these dodgy economics that they're effectively running with in regards to the budget. You are absolutely right. We have severe problems at the top. And I don't know if it's incompetence. I don't know if they're lying. It's probably a combination of both. I think US presidents have this thing in their minds in the way that the Brits used to have it in their minds of we're the masters of the world. And with that mindset, you can be deluded into thinking, well, we can just tell other people what to do. So we can tell Iran what to do. We can tell Canada what to do. We can tell Greenland what to do. We can tell China what to do. And when those countries say, yeah, no, okay, then they don't necessarily know how to respond. And in Trump's case, he's now in a trade war with our largest trade partner, meaning the amount of stuff we get from China. China can replace everything that they get from us. We cannot do it with them. We just can't do it. And at the very least, we can't do it in 2-3 years in the time frame that he is going to effectively be in office. It's cartoonish.
It's the golden age of America. That was the sales pitch. We're going to return to the golden age of America, the Gilded Age. You remember the Gilded Age?
Gilded Age, the 20s.
The breakers, no, but 1890s. That's when monopolies ran the United States. The Rockefellers, the Carnegie, the Mellons. This is when the monopolies ruled the country, owned the government. That's the golden age, the Gilded Age that Trump is taking us back to. But back in those days, okay, the U.S. had the reason, and they say, oh, we had tariffs back then. It was great. America was great back in the McKinley administration. We had tariffs and no income tax. This is not the same economy in the U.S., nor is it the same global economy that there was in 1890. It's kind of a different playing field, but let me just tell you a little economics lesson. Back in those days, the United States had an industrial-based economy. They actually manufactured stuff, and they exported. In fact, they had a problem with surplus of goods. And just around the problem, around this time, that's when the U.S. started doing expansionist foreign policy. Why? Spanish-American War, etc. New territories, more aggressive. Why? Because they needed markets for U.S. goods.
Yep.
Because they're having deflationary issues as well at home. So there was no massive behemoth of a federal government and a $1 trillion defense budget that they seem to want. That didn't exist back then. So compare, it is just so stupid to compare 2025 to 1890 and somehow try to get away with this in public. And people are stupid enough to believe it. That it's just unbelievable. And the worst part about this is, and by the way, China has an industry. So America was great. If you think monopolists are great, in fact, it was the government wrestling the monopolies and putting them under control and balancing out the economy that really made America great in the 20th century, not because of Rockefeller. Okay,
Right.
What China is doing is an industrial-based economy. So the U.S. moved from an industrial economy to a financialized economy, where just people like Trump's Treasury Secretary and Commerce Secretary make all the money. Okay, on Wall Street by doing subprime package loans and crashing markets and making tons and tons of money. When the stock market crashed, like they all did, they all made out like bandits last week. All these guys, Trump was bragging about how much money he and his buddies like Charles Schwab made from the crash. Wonderful. What does that do for the working American? Nothing. It just makes them more pissed off at people, the elites, and people who have the means and the resources to profit off crashes that they create with their own policies. It's crazy. So China has an industrial economy. China is doing everything that made America great. So China is great now. America is not great. America is in trouble financially. This is why this panic campaign of tariff wars has come down the pipeline with Trump, because that's what the owners of the global capital have told him he needs to do for different reasons. This is about the reallocation of capital. So they're demonizing China for doing all the right things. And then they're saying, no, China's bad. They're ripping us off. They're not. And the U.S. can never repatriate that industrial base. They can't. They're so financialized and it's so corrupt. They've bought and paid for the government 10 times over. That's not going to happen. What they're not telling you is the real reason why Trump instigated these trade wars. That's to force down the value of the dollar so they can refinance $9 trillion of U.S. debt that's coming mature right now. And there's waves of this debt that are coming into maturity. They're going to have to be paid. So they're doing a cheap trick, a very expensive trick of pushing down the value of the dollar so they can maintain balance of payments on this debt that's basically from this running annual U.S. deficit spend. That's the source of all the problems. So increasing external revenue from tariffs in order to pay for massive tax cuts for him and his buddies from the 2017 tax cut, and the sunset clause is coming. Massive deregulation, privatization. He wants to have the monopolists back, and then demonizing any labor movements or anything like this, demonizing any arbitration on some of these very, very important issues that are to do with the cost of living in the United States cannot keep pace. The U.S. can never be competitive. Never. The U.S. labor will never be competitive unless you crash the economy and cause a Great Depression. That's the only way you'll make U.S. labor competitive enough to be any kind of a competitor in manufacturing-wise with countries like China. It's not going to happen.
In his mind, if you increase costs, then you can bring labor back. I mean, that's the entire point of the drug thing, right? Or that's the entire point of some of these other tariffs. Is like, if we can increase the amount that Americans have to pay for goods and services, then people can make those goods and services here in the United States. Keep in mind, though, that the key point is you're increasing costs on Americans. Like, basically, people have to pay more. And this goes to the whole stagflation thing. Not only are you going to cause a recession, you're going to cause a recession with people paying more for the basic products that they effectively need to live, while simultaneously, as you point out, those tax cuts are going to be enshrined into law going forward, in addition to more tax cuts that the Republican Party is effectively putting through. They are talking about like $20 trillion in debt that they're adding to the
more
30
privatization.
trillion.
More privatization.
Yeah, more privatization.
So Jamal, what's the difference between China and the U.S.? Why does China have a lower cost of living? How come their food's affordable and we pay $20 for a tuna sandwich in America? Why is that? That's because China has state ownership of critical sectors like energy, for instance, like other areas. Some in countries that have state health care, Okay, they're able to control the cost of living to balance that out for the average worker, and therefore they don't have to pay them as high of a wage. In the U.S., it's like a casino gone wild with healthcare. It's the biggest ripoff on the planet. Americans are ripping Americans off.
Agreed.
What's Donald Trump blaming it on China for? China's not ripping America off. Americans are ripping Wall Street's private equity firms are ripping America's off to the point where the cost of living is so egregious, people working 3 and 4 jobs just to cover their health care, or you have to get a job with a big corporation that can pay for a decent health care premium. So that forces you to be basically an automaton and a corporate zombie, politically a zombie as well, because you can't say anything or do anything for fear of losing your gold-plated pension or your health care.
Yep.
It's corporate slavery. That's what this rampant privatization has done in all these areas. The Enron should have been the warning for America, but they caved. They caved after Enron, and guess what? Look at the cost of energy for the average person over the last 25 years. It's skyrocketed, and it's not that it costs any more to extract that energy out of the ground. It's that all these middlemen and all these traders on Wall Street have been siphoning money out of this process. That doesn't happen in China. That's why they have some level of control over the cost of living. And so that means that they don't have to pay a fraction of what Americans demand to be paid just to put a roof over their head.
Yeah.
It's crazy. America will never be competitive because they've demolished the country. They've demolished their own economy, and they've allowed the financial wizards and the parasites to suck all the real wealth out of the country by creating all of these middlemen and rentier systems. And Donald Trump represents all of those people, and he wants to increase their share of all of that. So how is this going to be better for the working class? It's a joke.
Yeah,
It's a joke. I mean, it's time to be honest with the American people. Stop this. This is not going to end well. I'm telling you right now, if this is the first 100 days, and him putting up stock tickers and saying, buy now, the market's down. I mean, it's just like a slap in the face to working class Americans. This is not going to end well for Trump. And I'm telling you, somebody that had supported him in the past and wants him to do well and be successful. But this is a circus so far in the first 100 days. It's not only embarrassing, it's disturbing.
Look, I would tell you, I didn't vote for Trump, but I wanted him to do well. And part of me wanting him to do well is because I wanted this destruction of the Democratic Party that happened, right? But what I didn't want is a situation where Trump is such a clown show that Democrats stand there without doing anything, without changing anything, and just say, that guy's a clown, vote for us. That's what I didn't want. That is decisively what I didn't want. And that is exactly what has taken place. And as you pointed out, this is just the first 100 days. Like, and it's not like he's backing away from this. He's like, in 90 days, I'm going to do it again, which means the markets and everything else have no idea what Donald Trump is doing. You have people saying, well, I can't buy a house. I have no idea what the president's going to do. I can't make a purchase. I can't do this. I can't do that, which again is another drag on this notion.
It's going to be a recession.
Yeah.
So we've got inflation. We got more inflation, which is a tax. Inflation is a stealth tax. Okay.
On the poor.
And it's controlled by the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government. They control how much we plebs on the lower end pay in stealth tax called inflation. Okay, they decide. Inflation doesn't touch them. They're into luxury goods. They're paying top end for everything. These people don't care about inflation. Okay, might hurt their bottom line a little bit. They just have to move some money around and they'll be all right. Maybe sell one of their 12 properties or something, get some equity. But so the stealth tax is inflation, and they've got that plus a recession, because this, as you said, Jamal, how can you invest in this environment of unpredictability? Markets hate unpredictability. Stagflation's coming. Stagflation's coming. Direct and foreign investment. Why would you want to DFI into an environment like that?
Yep.
That's where the manufacturing is going to come from, right? DFI. It's foreign money. But in this environment, with the cost so high, electricity, gas, rent, all these other state, local taxes, federal taxes, license, this, that, and the other. Just the pure cost of things. It's so over the top. Just the basic living costs is so insane in America. Your only choice is to flee to a market where, like a rural market where there's, affordability. Go to Tulsa, Oklahoma, or go to some of these sort of places. Or if you live in a city, if there's any ghetto left to move into, they've all been gentrified. So they're pushing you further outside of the city. So if you work in cities, you can't live in the city anymore in a lot of these places. You have to live way far out and commute a long distance in. From Washington, D.C. what that's like.
DC.
I mean,
yeah,
it's priced out of the market, and the same with other major cities in the U.S. So this system is not working. It's not working. It's only working for the top end. And, I'm in danger of sounding like a hardcore socialist, which I'm not, but their arguments are now relevant.
Yeah.
And this is what happens. And it's their own damn fault. If those arguments get traction, that's their fault. Okay. Because they didn't address it.
What do you think it takes? I mean, is this the administration where it's so in your face that it finally kind of seeps into the American public of we are being look, Sanders and AOC have been running around the country calling fighting the oligarchs. I strongly suspect the Democratic Party effectively gave them license to go and effectively do that, in which case Sanders is once again going to fold. But there's a reason that they're doing that, right? It's not like out of the blue when he's getting 30, 40,000 people and there's no presidential election anywhere near. Like there's a reason for that, right? There's a rationale for the reason that many people are showing up at that particular event all across the country in these numbers. What does it take to wake people up? And this can be the last question.
Well, it is going to feed they're doing a lot to feed Democrat mobilization of votes for the midterms for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to run on the economy, definitely, because it's not going to perform. And that's the fault of the Trump administration. If they lose the House or they, lose the Senate, whatever, it's their own fault because they haven't communicated what they're doing. And then they haven't executed what they're doing very well. And on the foreign policy front, this is zero-sum foreign policy and zero-sum trade policy. Like anybody's gain is our loss. This, right. I see this throughout everything that the Trump administration, this is the language coming out of everybody's mouth. This is completely wrong. If you live in a global community, we're on this planet. You can't execute zero-sum relations with everybody else on economics, on geopolitics, on political international politics. You can't. If you do, it's going to lead to war eventually. And if at the very worst, you could get shut out of the global economy. And this is what's happening. They're forcing this tariff war with China, Jamal, is just a way to sanction China without sanctioning them. That's what they've attempted to do. And it's backfired in the same way that they tried to sanction Russia by direct full sanctions. It has backfired. Russia growth projection 2025 is 3%.
Yeah.
Europe 0, US 0. Who's the winner? The geniuses in the Trump administration probably said, oh, we can't do the sanctions on China like we did with Russia because that didn't work. Let's do tariff wars. We'll get them that way. Like that's some clever sort of plot. But at the end of the day, a lot of this is WWF wrestling. Trump has been ordered to do this by the bankers because the bankers are doing some kind of a monetary reset. And unfortunately, the United States is going to be fodder probably for that reset. And that could be, we don't know what form that's going to take, but some kind of a transition from the dollar as a fiat world reserve currency into some other new system. Could be a multipolar system, could be a CBDC system, central bank digital currency. That's the one that they were really pushing hard during COVID. So the Bank of International Settlements, the U.S. Federal Reserve, they already have it set up. The Bank of England already have it set up. Europe already has it set up. They just have to switch it on. And once they switch it on, there's a parallel monetary track. And then they'll have to migrate the money over to the digital side with a whole lot more control, by the way.
Yeah,
over the digital dollar, or over the digital pound or euro, and so forth. And it'll force China had to hedge and prepare this as well. They have a digital renminbi ready because they can't be left out of the system. You see, if everybody has to be prepared, and whoever doesn't is going to be basically have to hitch a ride on somebody else's CBDC or just do a franchise of a bigger country. But they're not telling us this. Shouldn't Donald Trump, man of the people, be telling us what's coming down the pipeline for real instead of selling us this fake story about the golden age of America and bringing all the jobs back? I mean, this is just a lie. Be honest, level with the American people. Tell us about the great financial reset. They don't want to tell you because they're waiting for them, Peter Thiel and all the guys in Musk, who are all going to be on the ground level with their stable coins. And they're going to be the new Rockefeller class for the next 150 years. That's why they're not telling you, because they want to be building their ground level, and then they'll foist this thing onto us, the bankers and their minions. Donald Trump is a minion of the bankers. He works for global capital. He's been told to do this. So this isn't just something, he's executing it in a very ham-fisted, disingenuous way, but behind the scenes, they're lining up all their ducks, you see, for something new. All the central bankers, from the BIS to the Fed, Bank of England, all of them. These are the people that run the world. And they've already decided what's coming, but they're not telling you. They're not telling you. They're building their ground floor for them and their big tech elites, and then to ensure that their class will be in power and control for the next 100 or 200 years, as they were before. So that's, I would like a president of the USA who would just be honest with the American people. But maybe Trump doesn't know, or this is like above his head, above his pay grade, doesn't understand. I don't know what it is, but like playing all of us for fools at the moment. At least those people who are compos mentis enough to know that they're being played.
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't.
A lot of them think he's playing 5D chess.
Yeah,
And
6
I
million
don't
D
think-
chess.
Yeah, I don't think that's the situation. Patrick, man, you are always welcome on the show. Thank you for this. Patrick Henningsen, he is political analyst, or just to say geopolitical analyst, journalist, and host of the Sunday Wire, critic of mainstream media propaganda, and also 21st Century Wire, the magazine. Check it out. He's phenomenal. Thank you for this,
.com,
man.
21st century wire.com.
Thank you.
21st century wire.com. I'm the
wire.com.
founder and editor of that media outlet. So that's our mothership.
Oh, that's fair enough. Patrick, thank you for this, man. I really do appreciate it. You be safe, okay?
Take care.
You have a good one. All right. Yeah. Check out the magazine. Patrick is awesome. Always appreciate when he comes on. You can hear the taste of him here. Like I said, 21stcenturywire.com. You can hear more of it. He's the founder, creator of that outlet. And also there is sundaywire.com. Both of those outlets, the Patrick, you can find them at. And the man is fantastic. Like you just got a taste of him here. And his outlet goes through all sorts of stories. I've been following the outlet for a bit now, and I definitely appreciate him coming on and joining me. So thank you, Patrick. Deeply appreciate it, man. We are in for a ride, to put it mildly. And what I mean by that is this notion that Donald Trump can somehow unilaterally change the financial order by himself at the exact same time is rather outrageous. The fact that China has decided to move away certain items from the United States, again, from their point of view, we need them, not the other way around. And I think Donald Trump has this view that he himself, all-powerful president of the United States, he has this idea in his head of himself. And whether it's the Brits, whether it's some other government that was running the world at any particular time, there are tipping points where they do something and they realize they can't do it. This is what Patrick meant when he was saying zero sum, that ultimately the president is putting himself in a situation where either I win and you lose, or I lose and you win, as opposed to going for this notion of win-win relationships. What he's doing right now with China is a zero sum. One of them is going to have to back down, either China or the United States. Up to this point, Donald Trump had to back down. When Donald Trump was putting tariffs on the world, somebody had to back down. In this case, it was Donald Trump. He had to drop his tariffs down to 10%. In Ukraine, again, zero sum. Either Russia is going to win, Ukraine is going to lose, Ukraine is going to lose, Russia is going to win. And of course, Ukraine was a stalking horse for pretty much all of NATO and the US, considering even in the New York Times piece, they point out it was the US that was directing events, even on the ground in many respects. And they lost zero sum. These should be wake-up calls. I don't think they are, especially for a president that has gotten accustomed to the previous presidents and their idea of we're masters of the world. We can control all of these events. I want to bring in my guests. We're joined with Arnaud Develay. Arnaud is, there we are. Arnaud is an author, political analyst, and international lawyer specializing in international criminal law. His latest book, Entanglements, Biden, Ukraine, and the Fracturing of the American Political Consensus. And law knows there is a fracturing, not just of the American political consensus, but also of the transatlantic relationship, according to, I think it was Financial Times recently. How you doing, Arnaud? You doing okay this morning? What's that morning for you?
I'm doing
okay.
It's afternoon, actually.
Yeah.
I'm doing fine. How are you? Are you feeling better?
Yes, I am. My cold is gone. I still have a sprain, my arm hurts, but all things being equal, I am okay. I'm intact. And I'm glad that you could join me. Thank you. I still don't have my phone. So shout out to Mama Thomas for reaching out on my behalf.
No problem.
Hopefully I'll get it today. Apparently it's supposed to be in the mail. But I'm glad that you can join me. And you are the person that I wanted to talk to. There are a few things that are taking place. One of those things that are taking place is a narrative in the United States on the attack on Sumy. Now, Russia is saying, look, there was a military, I can't call it a parade. It's like a military ceremony. There were NATO people there. There were Ukrainian soldiers there, many of which had invaded Kursk, and we attacked that military ceremony. Now, the US's story is these were all civilians. Russia just attacked civilians just out of the blue. The problem with that narrative is that the people on the ground even pointed out, well, for one, Zelensky dismissed the Sumy governor over the military gathering. That was that. You also had the situation where right here, and I'm going to put this out just so the audience can see it, just so, not making this up. Right here, Russia's strike on Sumy caused infighting in Ukrainian officials due to military activity close to civilians. The Ukrainian mayor of Konota calls for the resignation of the head of the military administration for the Sumy region and the head of the regional, head of the regional, where is it? Administration for the Sumy region, the head of the SBU. And right here, this came out. Head of the OVA article, head of the SBU for the Sumy region, you have until 18 to resign and kneel before the dead children. Apparently he ran. Apparently they say he ran knocking children out the way as he was trying to get away from, I guess, the missile strike that was effectively taking place. I guess my point is, these were military officials. It wasn't just randomly attacking civilians. These were military officials. And even in Ukraine itself, as they were talking about it, they're discussing it in the context of there was something going on in the military capacity that the Russian military hit. What can you tell us about this?
Well, I can only go with what we've been witnessing in those far as the Ukrainian regime is concerned when it comes down to their own civilians. So we know that even though the military aspect of the campaign, or whatever you want to call it, bears no results, they are bent on literally kidnapping people off the street. As the time moves on, it's the age limit gets lower and lower. We know that they've thrown women into the meat grinder. They've sent people with disability on the front lines as well. So you're asking me, in other words, if the Ukrainian regime would be so cynical so as to plant military awarding of ceremonies types, medals in the midst of civilians, in order to eventually, to the extent the Russians decide to target this gathering, they could then use it against the Russians in the propaganda war to say, look, the Russians are not obeying the laws of wars and they're killing civilians indiscriminately. The answer is yes.
Yeah.
Kiev will do that because that's all they've got left, essentially, trying to, shore up support, especially in America, because this is really what's going on right now. And in America, as far as the administration is concerned, it seems like patience is wearing thin. We also don't know the content of what was discussed between Witkoff and Putin, but I'm pretty sure that allusions were made that those are people with whom we cannot sit down and hope to have a reasonable conversation about anything. Let's put it this way. So, to make a long story short, this is the umpteenth expression of complete disregard for their own civilians. And basically now we're seeing not senior level, but local leaders in Ukraine basically having had their fill with this, because they understand the cynicism which prompts Kiev to create those situations, and that they don't want any more parts of it. They don't want to be part of it, and they want people to be held accountable. So is that a pruit? Is that a symptom of something that might grow and become a swell at some point, leading to an existential crisis for Kiev? It's too early to say. Yeah. But I've seen the individual that you are referring to, the mayor, and he was extremely explicit in how he was calling for accountability. Essentially calling the governor and the head of the local SBU, all kind of names which I won't mention here, but essentially saying, we're coming for you. That's what he said. We're going to kill you. So
this guy, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Oh, I'm not going to play the clip because it's in a different language, but please continue. I'm sorry. I just wanted to make sure it was the same. We were talking.
No, actually, you should play it because it's subtitled, so it's perfect for our audience, so they can get a gist of. Yeah.
Хоча він взагалі не добрий день. Я зараз звертаюся до мудака, губернатора Сумської області, Артюха, чучела. Якщо ти до 18:00 не станеш на коліна, скотина, і не вибачишся перед людьми, і не складеш свої повноваження голови адміністрації, падла ти кончене. І якщо з тобою красношапка, який також в темі, нічого не протидіє в цьому, не складете свої повноваження з той начальника СБУ області, а ти чучела з голови адміністрації, то тобі там ракети по Сумам прилітають, да? І зараз, просто так все відбулося, да? 18:00, чорт! Я розкажу, що відбулося. Скотина, Скільки нам будуть призначати таких невміняємих, як оці Артюхи, як оці красношапки, Більше 20 загиблих, ідіть там. Мразь! Артюх, ти мразь, просто мразь.
Just wow. Saying scumbag, you should resign. I mean, look, he has a point, right? I mean, you're holding a military ceremony in a civilian area, knowing full well that you could be targeted, just like the other people were targeted when they were holding military ceremonies. Him being the mayor, it's like, you've just gotten all of these people killed. For what? For what? And then for the US to be like, this was clearly just civilians. That's all. There was nobody else there, just civilians. Okay, well, that clip makes it kind of pretty clear that he found them culpable, meaning him, the Ukrainian mayor of that area, found them culpable for having that ceremony there in the very first place. Just amazing.
Yeah. Well, obviously, he wasn't the mayor. That is, he wasn't in on it. Had he been in on it, he would have basically said, "We're not doing this." But obviously, you know, there are two types of officials in Ukraine right now: those who have no qualms about sacrificing civilian lives for, you know, momentous, temporary, you know, media effect, and those who understand that we're dealing with families who are grief-stricken, and who at some point are going to be coming to get some answers, to get some accountability. And this guy doesn't want to be, you know, what should I call it, the sacrificial lamb, because this is what might happen. They're going to say, you know, just take it to the local people. You know, we have no idea what you're talking about. He's responsible. So the guy sees, you know, the writing on the wall. He understands that at some point he might be, you know, thrown out to the crowd's vindicate. And he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to be, you know, the patsy for this.
And by the way,
so that's why he's coming out. He's coming out and making a point. He's going on record. Now, I don't know if this is not going to adversely cost him, you know, cause him physical harm to his integrity. It's possible that now the SBU is going to be coming for him. But at least, you know, he's clearing his conscience, which, you know, I mean, that's pretty much all he can do at this point. But this is actually par for the course of what's going on in Ukraine. It's a very divided society, and not this kind of monolithic, all patriotic spirit. No, this the train has left the station on this. People are fed up. They understand that the gig is up. They understand that they are being thrown into the meat grinder so that a few people at the top can pocket, you know, a foreign aid and invest in luxurious villas out there, and God knows what else, while everybody else is left, you know, with their grief, essentially.
Yeah. Well, he went further. He said after the first arrival of the Senator Sumy, General Arnaud ran like a crazy first, throwing and knocking down children in his way. Effectively, you know, that's a Seinfeld episode where George, there was a fire and George goes running, knocking old women and children out the way to try to get out of the building. That's effectively what he's trying to say took place with the guy. He said he ran like cowards after the first shot, where all of these other people effectively were killed. That is astonishing. And that is a great disparity between what is being presented in the, mind you, we are paying 80%, 70 to 80% of the genocide that's taken place in Israel. And yet the newspapers in the US are still printing, oh my God, look at the Sumy attack, killing civilians. That just astonishing disparity between these two things. Yeah, I just wanted to hit that. The other thing I have to hit also, what is the reporting inside Russia on this issue of Witkoff's meeting with Putin? From my understanding, Witkoff, or Putin wouldn't give an inch in regards to the special military operation. Witkoff comes back and says, look, the fastest way to get this over with is to ensure that the 4 regions end up with Russia, even though Witkoff apparently didn't know what those 4 regions were, which is just funny to me. But
he knows now. He does now, I'm sure.
Yeah, he's aware now.
He's
aware now.
Well, 5.5 hours, so he had time to get a grand master class from Putin himself.
Yeah, and he had write them down. It's like, all right, I'm going to write these on my head, 4 regions. But from my understanding, Putin didn't give an inch. And, you know, there was a larger issue that they were talking about. And mind you, this is just kind of leaks that are coming out. We don't necessarily entirely have a readout of both. Why don't we have a readout? I'm just curious on even that front. Why don't we have a explicit readout from the US and from Russia in regards to what they discussed? Why the secrecy? That's assuming you even know.
I would say 2 reasons. Number one, there are obviously third parties who are not looking at this rapprochement very keenly and would want nothing more than trying to find out what's being discussed so they can undermine it through rumors, unfounded rumors, and or interference, what have you. So it's better that what the content of those discussions, and that includes the discussions that were held in Istanbul, because there was no readout almost coming out of Istanbul, except some hours later, a very generic garden variety boilerplate language communique from the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but nothing really, specific. So that's the first reason. Try to make sure that they're not being undermined. Yes, as the process goes on. The second thing is, and I think you're right, there's way more being discussed than Ukraine per se, and or those regions being recognized as part of the Russian Federation in any future peace accord. I think we're talking about commercial ventures of a very large scale, and there was a communique, an article actually from TASS, which is it's like the French, the Russian Reuters, or the Russian what you might call it, Associated Press, and basically they were quoting Witkoff, and they were quoting what's his name, Dmitriev, the head of the investment fund.
Right, Kirillov. Right.
We're talking about discussions, I think, that are bearing on creating huge partnerships between the two countries, and the nature and the depths and the scale of those partnerships is, in my opinion, what will determine the long-term solutioning of the Ukraine situation, the Ukraine conflict.
It sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you said that Trump is actually making, or his negotiators are actually making progress on some kind of peace initiative that goes beyond the issue of Ukraine, where Ukraine is an item in a larger framework for like this kind of security partnership. What's fascinating about this doesn't include Europe.
No, of course not.
That's the fascinating part to me.
Yeah, that's the whole point.
Because we're talking about like a new security architecture of Europe based on a US-Russian relationship that in no way includes Europe.
Let's call it the embrace of the bear. He embraces you, and he shocks you with love, to such an extent that you have so much at stake now, so many interests, that you're going to go out of your way to get the European chihuahuas to back off.
Do you think they would?
Well, if the Americans are sold on something that looks like potentially trillions of dollars in investments and assorted profit, yes, of course.
That is astonishing. I mean, because honestly, I got to be honest with you. I have been very, what's the word I'm looking for? Disbelieving that Donald Trump was really making progress on this. And yet, like you said, he's a business guy. Kirillov is a business guy. Putin chose to send a business guy into Washington, into DC, to have conversations about business. And as Witkoff is pointing out, hey, we should give up these 4 regions. Okay, well, there's divisions within the Trump administration on where to go with this. The fact that Donald Trump keeps using Witkoff, though, on some level, shows that Donald Trump believes in Witkoff's point of view. I mean, for God's sake, he's sending them to Iran, he's sending them to Israel, he's sending them to Ukraine or to Russia. He's been sending him all over these places to deal with all of his foreign policy issues.
Whatever happened to Rubio? I mean,
I know, right? Well, that just means he doesn't trust Rubio.
He doesn't trust Rubio at all.
Oh, it's fascinating. I find this to be completely fascinating.
So it's like a parallel administration. So
yeah,
to appease the rhino and the neocons, he picks guys like Rubio's and what's his name, Waltz. Yeah.
Waltz and Kellogg. Yeah.
Right.
And it's
but but it completely sidelines them as far as the nitty gritty, discussion, negotiation part with on any of those hot button issues, Iran, Ukraine, Russia, potentially China. We don't know. We'll see. But so the State Department is being completely sidelined. Why? It makes sense because the State Department is pretty much neocon central.
Yeah.
Still today.
Is there anything that Putin will accept? I mean, meaning those 4 regions from the Russian point of view, this is part of our Russian Federation, full stop. There's no negotiation. There's no discussion on these items.
There's no going back on that. People have voted. Yeah.
Right. He's not going back. That's a done deal. Meaning if you got to accept any agreement at all, that is baked into it. No expansion of NATO. That is baked into it. Denazification of Ukraine, is that baked into it? Because I would imagine that, correct me if I'm wrong, that when Russia looks at Ukraine, part of the problem is the government of Ukraine. It was the government that decided we're going to get rid of political parties or opposition parties. We're going to get rid of opposition media. We're going to start this kind of civil war taking place in Donbass in and of itself. Meaning they made these choices. You could say the U.S. pushed them on these choices, fair enough. But at the end of the day, it's this government that is full of these banderites that are outright fascists in the way that they effectively operate. As you pointed out, that mayor may get a bullet at some point for coming out saying what he said. I would imagine Zelensky, Boris Johnson even pointed out that part of the reason that Zelensky couldn't accept the Minsk agreements is because he would have had a bullet put in him if he accepted it. And whoever signs their name on a peace treaty may get a bullet put in them if indeed they have the same government and the same structures in place. Would Russia accept the government not changing as party to a peace deal?
No, and they've been really clear about it. This government is not legitimate from the president all the way down.
So, yeah, but even if you get rid of Zelensky.
No, because Zelensky is the president of a cabinet. So that means those cabinets are appointed by Zelensky. They serve at his pleasure, at his, will. So they're all compromised.
Wow. That's fascinating.
And actually, you might have heard that they added an extra, I think, 90 days, right? They postponed it for the election. So martial law is extended. So there won't be any elections even during summertime. We were talking several times about maybe, having an electoral campaign in, let's say, April, May, June, with elections maybe at the latest being held in September, early September, after the summer break. Well, that's out of the question now.
Not so much.
So now we're looking maybe at, the next suitable window for such electioneering might be, around November, December, maybe early next year, 2026. Then this guy is not going away on his own.
Yeah.
And you can see the rhetoric is not improving either because, basically saying that the US is supporting Russia. This was yesterday. And Vance had to come out and basically correct the guy. So I don't know. I guess the main question is how long is the current US administration tolerate this guy basically not acting as any US satrap has been known to act, historically. I mean, this is the first time in history, in US history, that I see a US proxy basically, acting on his own without any sense of consequences.
Well, I think
I've never seen that before.
Well, I think he thinks Europe is going to take the place of the United States. That's the sense that I get. When he was there with Europe, they were patting him on the head. Oh, it's okay. Orange man said bad things about you. It's all right. It's all right. And Zelensky was like, well, we're working on something with Europe. Okay, well, what are you working out with Europe? The United States was the main driver in this. I mean, in regards to intelligence, in regards to that. In fact, from my understanding, the Brits couldn't even fire their missiles if it wasn't for the U.S. intelligence assisting them in firing their missiles at the time. So we are the main driver in this. And to point out, to your point about the Trump administration having nothing but contempt for Zelensky, this is Trump the other day where he is effectively slamming Zelensky, and maybe Trump is slamming them because he heard the exact comment that you were talking about.
Have you spoken to President Zelensky, sir, about his offer to purchase more Patriot missile batteries?
Oh, I don't know. He's always looking to purchase missiles. You know, he's against. Listen, when you start a war, you got to know that you can win the war. Right? You don't start a war against somebody that's 20 times your size, and then hope that people give you some missiles.
Trump famously don't like losers, so there's that. But then Zelensky said this, which should be a bombshell, to be honest, because it's a stalemate. It's a stalemate. And it's obviously clear at this point to anybody paying attention, it is not a stalemate, that this is not what is taking place right now. Donald Trump's urgency on some level is because he wants, at least, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, he wants the Ukrainian military to still be standing at the point where they get a deal. Otherwise, Russia effectively runs the table. This is Zelensky owning up to something, finally, that was true for a very long time, but this is my first time hearing him say it.
А нам не вистачає сил деокупувати все. І це зрозуміла ситуація на сьогодні. І тому дипломатично ця війна закінчиться. Ми не визнаємо території руськими, ті, які тимчасово окуповані.
Okay, is Russia going to accept that? I mean, Zelensky is effectively saying, look, we can't win this war. We don't have the power to take back the territories. Okay, yeah, everybody knew that at this point, right? This was obvious to everybody with the exception of apparently you. And yet you continuously throw people into the meat grinder if you indeed acknowledge we can't win the war. And yet more and more people, hey, let's throw in our 18-year-olds. Hey, let's bring in women. Let's throw them into the meat grinder. Even though he himself knows they can't win the war. That is an astonishing admission for Zelensky to make. And then to say at the end of it, we will not recognize those territories. Okay, how does that work? I would imagine from the Russian point of view, they want an acknowledgement, A, you lost. B, these territories are ours. They're part of our constitution. And if you're not going to own up to the fact that they are ours, then what? Do they keep the war going?
You summed it all up. That makes no
It's
sense.
fascinating to me. Like, how do you say we have no
He's
capacity?
tacitly, yeah, he's tacitly admitting that this whole endeavor is destined to fail, but he's not drawing the conclusions. So that means, so de facto is admitting that he's not the proper guy to negotiate.
Yeah. Yeah. And by
So
the
where
way,
do we go from here? Yeah.
I don't
Oh, and
understand-
to top things up, he says, I don't hate putting 99%. I hate putting 100%.
Did he
I
say
mean,
that?
yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious. So it's like,
Who talks
I
like
heard
this?
Lavrov make the point of saying we cannot have a fascist regime overseeing Russian citizens in these regions. That is a no, which goes to the point of regime change. He can't be in office. His cabinet can't be in office when they sign a deal. I'm fascinated by this.
Every
Because
time
I
this
don't
guy
know-
opens his mouth, he gives ammunition to those who would be want to get rid of him faster than, sooner than later, and then without waiting for elections.
Well, I guess the catch becomes, how do you get rid of him? He doesn't seem to be going anywhere, and he's doing everything in his power to stay in the position that he's in. And yet, I hate Putin 100%. Okay, then how do you negotiate with this guy? If you hate him 100%, I think he's the devil. I think he saved himself. Okay, how do you negotiate under those terms? And then to say, we don't have the power to take back the regions, then why are you fighting? Then why are you continuing the fight? Like you're wasting manpower as opposed to coming to some kind of diplomatic solution, something that was obvious to everybody years ago, and yet not obvious to Zelensky for whatever particular reason. It's just, That is a fascinating clip. That is a massive admission by Zelensky.
So I guess the alternative for him is to get a ceasefire so he can have time to rearm and regroup and start over in 6 months from now.
which Russia's
That's
not
the
going to.
only that's the only thing that you draw as a conclusion out of what the guy says in this interview.
By the way, what do you make of Donald Trump came out and says this, which he's kind of right, but he's also kind of wrong at this point. I mean, we're 100 days in. Donald Trump was supposed to end the war in 24 hours. We're 100 days in. Listen to what he says here on Air Force One. They're asking him questions about the war.
I made a mistake. I believe it was. Look, you're going to ask them. This is Biden's war. This is not my war. I've been here for a very short period of time. This is a war that was under Biden. He gave him billions and billions of dollars. He should have never allowed, if he had any brain, which he didn't have and doesn't have, and now it's being proven, he wouldn't have allowed that war to start. I would have absolutely not. That war would never have taken place. But remember this is Biden's war. I'm just trying to get it stopped so that we can save a lot of lives. They happen to be Ukrainian and Russian lives. But all I want to do is get it stopped.
See, from my point of view, you can make that argument and stop sending weapons, stop intelligence, and come to say, okay, look, we've stopped weapons, we've stopped intelligence, we want a ceasefire. Trump just signed additional sanctions. He's still sending weapons. And the catch becomes, okay, well, when Joe Biden's money runs out, I think it's like a few $1 billion left on that, the amount of money that Joe Biden effectively dedicated to this war, then what? Do you pass another bill through Congress? I mean,
That would be a revealing moment, I guess.
Right, but if they do, that's his war.
It becomes his war, yes. But it's kind of revealing that he would say this 100 days into, that means that a lot of people are already kind of, putting his own feet to the fire, like what's going on? What are you really, as you just said, what are you doing tangible, stepwise, to stop the war?
Yeah.
And the fact that he's harkening back on this is Biden's war, I had nothing to do with it. It's not my war. Yeah, but you're in charge now. Forget Biden. You're in charge. You're the person in charge. You can stop that war. You can stop it tomorrow. Literally, you can stop it tomorrow. So what do they have on him that he's not acting the way he should? That's the question.
Look, from my point
that
of view,
makes no sense.
That should have been his argument from the beginning.
The Wall Street Journal released an article yesterday pointing out to members of the administration trying to prompt Trump to crack down on Russia. So it would appear as if his own administration is split on how to go about dealing with Russia.
They are. Yeah. Because Kellogg wanted to go with the European plan. Kellogg effectively wanted to put troops, European troops, in Ukraine at the end of the ceasefire, which, again, is a non-starter. If you do that, the war continues. Whereas Witkoff was like, give them the 4 regions, acknowledge it. That's the fastest way to end the war. That split is there. And Donald Trump sits on the head of a pin where nobody knows where he falls on this. And where he falls, he's going to have to make a choice. These are 2 very different plans in regards to, we're going to put European troops in Ukraine. Okay, well, some of those attacks that Russia were doing were aimed at going after European mercenaries, specifically going after them in order to make that point. So that is going to be not tolerated, and I've considered that to be a stalking horse to effectively not stopping the war. At least that's the way I take it. Whereas Witkoff's plan, I don't even know if the Russians will fully accept that if it doesn't include these other items of NATO expansion and these type of things.
The Russian position is really clear. We have to sit down with the ambit of addressing the long-term root causes of the current conflict. the Russians, they know they're going to have one shot at it, and they want to make sure that the approach that is adopted takes into account an entire panopticon. And this involves, NATO membership, denazification, demilitarization, getting the international recognition in international text and treaties of the 4 regions into the Russian Federation. Otherwise, we're wasting our time here. There's no point in talking about just some peripheral issue. We either get down to business with everything that, can be gained in terms of partnership also, but, short of, agreeing on those fundamental principles before we begin to discuss the implementation phase,
Mhm.
it's all in vain to me.
Do the
Another
Russians
thing
even...
about, yeah,
No, please.
just
Continue. I'm sorry.
going back to Witkoff being essentially Trump's point man on a lot of those hot button issues. Somebody, one of our fellow commentators was pointing out that it's difficult for someone like Witkoff to handle so many files without having the administrative support that one would expect if you're the Secretary of State.
Right.
That same person was pointing out, suggesting that maybe Witkoff could be named National Security Advisor, and he would get that staff to help him. And to the extent he could be enjoying life. The guy is a billionaire, according to Laura Loomer. So if he's doing what he's doing now, is because he really cares about helping his friend and his longtime friend Donald Trump. And he's bringing a new, novel, ideological, free perspective on all those issues. And he's a businessman, as Trump is a pragmatist.
Mhm.
So why don't you go the next step and just integrate him into the administration, give him a cabinet position?
It's not a bad idea, considering all the work that he's effectively doing. Donald Trump clearly trusts him. Does Russia even want a deal? Meaning, do they want to solve this militarily, or do they want to solve this over the diplomatic table? What's the chatter in Russia about it?
The chatter is they will always privilege diplomatic issues, outcomes, means of resolving any problem, not just the Ukrainian problem. But as any, reasonable, rationally based nation state, why would you expand military, human life, resources when you can talk it out, talk it over? So fundamentally, there's always, the door is always open for negotiation and diplomacy. But Russia has been burned so many times, if we just take the Ukraine file alone, that I think they run out of patience as far as being strung along. So they will keep the door open, but as the door remains open and no one steps through it with genuine intention on addressing all those core issues, the military branch will keep doing its work until the framework for negotiation changes qualitatively in such a way that there won't be any other issue for the other side but to sit down and negotiate in a position of weakness. So this is where we are right now. Russia, stands pat. They are willing to discuss to the extent there's a genuine, honest partner to discuss things with, but they're not going to bank everything on negotiations.
Mhm.
That train has left the station. It's over. Negotiation 100%. And trust me, bro. No,
Not so
it's
much.
over. It's over. The trust me, bro. It's over. And you can see it in the semantics. I mean, they're not calling Westerners our partners anymore. This term has gone out of fashion.
How do they? I mean, how do you see Trump in this? I mean, if you look at Russian media, they would say, "Oh yeah, we totally, trust Trump," which they don't. I don't buy that for a moment, right? This is just diplomatic speak in the way that they're talking about it. But up to this point, it's not like Trump has tangibly done anything that has been overtly significant, where they can point to, okay, he's making verbal overtures, and he's making overtures in regards to sending diplomats. These are things that the Joe Biden administration didn't do, and I would imagine that all things being equal, Russia does appreciate that part. With this notion of trying to get closer and closer together. Trump is in a political environment, though, where you have liberals who any movement in that direction, he gets attacked. And from his point of view, this is Joe Biden's war. This is Joe Biden's war. That should have been the framing that he went with. I'm ending this. This is Joe Biden's war. Instead of playing this kind of game that initially I think I agreed with. Now I don't. I think I've evolved on this. I'm sick of this war. And the idea of Zelensky flipping out Europe, doing any and everything in their power in order to put the kibosh on it. The longer it takes them, the more time it gives them to kind of arrange something of whatever they're trying to do in Europe. I don't know. What is your read on Trump up to this point?
Well, I think he's trying to present himself as the strong, determined leader, but the facts don't bear that out. And we see it also with the China tariff issue. He's communicating too much. He's playing out too much for the media and to his own base, I would assume. But in the end, it's the actions that really, support your rhetoric.
Yeah.
And the Russians are, I think, secretly rooting for him to be that person that he presents himself as. But as time goes on and no concrete results can be, observed on the ground, it becomes difficult to reconcile this image that Trump likes to put out there of himself as a decisive figure, transformational figure, versus someone who has to somehow keep everybody at bay and some kind of balance, so that, he somehow does not feel like he's under pressure to do things that fundamentally he does not want to do.
Mm-hmm.
He's trying to somehow present things in a way that, I've done as much as could be done short of shooting myself in the foot, so that, it cannot be said that, I did not fulfill the promises that I made to my donors, let's say. But at the same time, if there's no results, tangible results, and America has a lot of existential issues to deal with, to tackle on right now.
Yeah.
And he seems to be opening kinds of worms every single place he goes to, antagonizing people. I think during his first term, this kind of raising the bar, only to then sit down and somehow negotiate some kind of agreement, that was fresh during the first term. In that second term, not so much.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's going to have to, review that approach and maybe talk less. And when he does talk, announce something tangible and concrete.
He's too visible, too many L's, not getting enough done, too busy, can of worms, all that stuff. No, I agree with you. Trade wars, potential wars with Iran, not getting anything done with Russia, trade war with with China. Yeah, I agree with you. Arnaud, man, thank you for this. Arnaud Develay. He is an author, political analyst, international lawyer specializing in international criminal law. His book, Foreign Entanglements, Biden, Ukraine, and the Fracturing of America's Political Consensus. Thank you, Arnaud, man. I really appreciate these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamal.
You have a good one. Be safe. All right. I would like to bring in my next guest, another good friend of this show, the man himself, Daniel McAdams. He's executive director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. Daniel, welcome to the show, man. Thank you. How you doing today?
Good morning, Jamal. How are you?
I am doing all right. Better that you are with me. I have to start with this notion of immigration. Well, I guess there are two topics. One has to do with this kind of thing with Iran that Donald Trump is engaged in, where there is threat after threat after threat, with a notion of negotiation kind of on the side. This idea that we can threaten them into a better deal. And if they don't accept this deal, we would launch these major strikes against Iran. Witkoff is Donald Trump's point guy for everything. He's point guy for Iran, point guy for Russia, point guy, what was he, for Israel. Donald Trump has been sending him all across the world on all of these various issues. I've never seen anything like it. It's almost as if he doesn't trust his State Department. I guess my question to you is, why doesn't he trust his State Department?
Well, because he's hired all the wrong people again, just like he did last time, you know. He hired a bunch of dopes last time, and then he did nothing but complain about how terrible they were the whole time they worked for him, like John Bolton. He kept saying what an idiot he is. And then he hired the exact same kind of people. I mean, these are the exact same kind of people. Marco Rubio is obviously not up to the task. Pete Hegseth is not up to the task. And so he has to have his old buddy Witkoff to do all the work of, you're right, of everyone. He should get a double salary. And so on the one hand, it's that. But on the other hand, it's actually, I've been thinking about this, it's actually not a bad idea that Witkoff is involved in all this, because he's not a foreign policy guy. Because if you are a foreign policy guy, then you're infected with the neocon virus. You're infected with all this crap that people in the Beltway have. So he kind of comes at it with a fresh perspective. So although, like, institutionally, I think it's absolutely nuts. But in terms of getting things done, it's probably a good idea that he has Witkoff. Can you imagine if Rubio was doing all this? It would be nothing but a disaster. It would be worse than Blinken.
Yeah, I know. Well, I don't know if you could be worse than Blinken. Blinken was pretty trashy on all of these issues and only knew how to escalate, despite the fact that he wasn't really getting anything done. This is Lindsey Graham. Now, up to this point, Donald Trump and the Republicans have not been backbiting him, meaning they haven't been putting a knife in him and what he was doing from a foreign policy standpoint. On the issue of Ukraine, they obviously disagree with Donald Trump. There's a clear schism in the Trump campaign. There's the Kellogg's of the world that want troops in Europe and zones or whatever the hell he wants. And then there's Witkoff, who's more practical. It's like, look, you can't take these territories back. Even Zelensky owns up to the fact that you can't take the territories back. If you want the war to end, the fastest way to do it is here. This is the way to do it. Now, this, I would imagine, split also goes for other foreign policy issues, even with issues of Iran. This is Graham. Graham is a lunatic. Graham is a complete lunatic. And he's lying here, by the way. But I'm going to play this clip and I want to get your take.
So they have enough highly enriched uranium to make 6 bombs. And Katie said something all of us agree with. They will use it. If you're watching TV out there, Iran is very close to assembling 6 nuclear bombs. They will kill Israel. They'll come after us. They'll try to purify Islam. Donald Trump is the only thing between them and a bomb. They have to believe he will take down their refineries. They have to believe that he will blow them off the face of the planet. Out those.
They have to believe. They have to believe. Now, it's one thing to believe. It's another thing being willing to do. Those are two very different things. But Graham is making this argument that is not founded within the U.S. government's own analysis. Tulsi Gabbard, working for the Trump administration, said Iran is not trying to get a bomb. Iran had the potential to get a bomb for God knows how long. They have not did it. They were a party to the JCPOA. They followed even under, there was nothing to say that they weren't abiding by the terms of the JCPOA. So Graham is just making this up. This was the same argument Netanyahu made 20 years ago, that Iran was 2 seconds away from getting a bomb and was going to effectively destroy the world. Well, that's an astonishing clip just for the mendacity of it.
Yeah, I mean, who was he talking to? Some fundy group or something, I mean, it sounded like that's what he was doing. Yeah, of course he's a liar. And in fact, people like him make the case to Iran to get the bomb. Just finally get it so these people leave you alone. That's the only way to be left alone. So why is it that Israel's allowed to have 100 bombs 100 nuclear bombs. Oh, well, they're responsible with him. Yeah, they just slaughtered 100,000 people, probably more than that, in Gaza, most of them women and children. Has Iran done that? No, they haven't. So maybe they should have the bomb just to shut people like Lindsey Graham and all the liars in D.C. up.
Agree. I don't understand how Israel can have one and then Iran can't. I just don't get the logic of this, right? But it's not about logic; it's about power in this case. I was watching your channel, and you were pointing out something that I full-heartedly agree with. This notion of real ID, that's one issue. Deporting people without due process, that's the other issue. I think these things are linked in many respects. The issue of free speech, this notion that you can chuck people out of the country if they criticize the country. Okay, that's pretty outrageous. We have a First Amendment in this country. Even the people who may be coming to this country who have a green card, you would imagine that there's still due process in regards to chucking people out of the country. This idea of sending somebody to El Salvador, the Supreme Court says bring them back, and the Trump administration just blows it off, which creates a constitutional crisis. I think all of these things are linked to one another. What is your take? Because you may disagree with me on this. Give me your thoughts.
Well, what happened, okay, is you have a bunch of people coming in under the Biden administration, but you also have the entire right wing flipping out over it and making it such a political issue. Yeah, the borders weren't secure. That's true. And there's a problem with that. But so when Trump comes in, he, of course, polarizes the whole thing. His administration polarizes the whole thing so that if you care about anything beyond throwing people out, then you're just some left-winger. But remember, when he started with the First Amendment attacks, he started by saying people in this country on student visas who come over here and become violent, they're going to be deported. And so not only the extreme right-wingers, but most Americans said, okay, that probably sounds all right. He said it in a way that you can't really argue with that. If you come over here and you start, kicking people upside the head, then you probably don't belong here. But in fact, what he did is he immediately started deporting people or trying to deport people who were not violent. And in fact, Washington Post, even a couple of days ago, printed an article saying that the State Department knew that the woman, the PhD woman from Tufts, they knew, Ozturk, her name is, they already had a report that she was not involved in terrorist activity and she was not involved in anti-Semitic activity at all. They knew that before they arrested her, Soviet style, people in face masks, handcuffing her. She had no idea what was going on. They knew that she had only written an article in the school newspaper. They knew it, and they didn't care, And by making it a right and left issue, somehow I'm some sort of leftist. Other people on the right are some sort of leftist because you point out that this is not how you do things. You don't grab people off the street because they say things about a foreign country you don't like. But that's what's happening right now. And so it said at first it's going to be violent people. And then it actually started arresting non-violent people. And we'll probably get to this. And you have the visit by the president of El Salvador over the weekend. And Trump says, I want to start deporting American citizens. This is the slippery slope, like right before our eyes.
Yep. And just to make that point, you have Bukele, whose claim to fame is effectively throwing people in violent, disgusting prisons. And Donald Trump thought, hey, it's a great idea if we do this to Americans. In which case, there's an open mic or a hot mic with Donald Trump saying, homegrown is next. Effectively, we will be throwing Americans in El Salvadorian prisons next, which should sound alarm bells for anybody, meaning the alarm bell should be sounding just on the due process alone. Donald Trump put Garcia, what is his first name? Let me find his first name. Kilmar Obrega Garcia. 2019, the court said he could stay in the country, that he was not to be deported. Donald Trump blows it off. So he blows off a court order, deports him to El Salvador. They put him in a prison. They declare him MS-13, to which Donald Trump himself has declared a terrorist. There's been no judicial review of this. There's been no due process of this. They put him on a plane and shipped him to El Salvador. The Trump administration admits oh, we screwed up. This was a quote unquote administrative error. But then still continues to say, well, the guy's a terrorist. The guy's a terrorist. You get Bukele in the White House. Now, keep in mind, Bukele has problems of his own. There have been articles pointing out that this reputation that he's crafted around himself, oh, I'm tough on crime and everything else. He was working with those same gangs, those terrorists, as Donald Trump calls them. Apparently, Bukele was working with those terrorists in order to keep crime down. So he would make a deal. They would funnel money and whatnot in the kickbacks to Bukele's campaign when he was effectively running in El Salvador, meaning there was an incestuous relationship between him and these quote unquote terrorists, as Donald Trump calls it, with the idea of keeping violence down on the streets. So there's that. Bukele is sitting here. Listen to what they say. There are two clips for this. First clip.
Well, Mr. President, you said that if the Supreme Court said someone needed to be returned, that you would abide by that. You said that on Air Force One just a few days ago. And they said that it must be facilitated.
Why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country? Why can't you just say that? Why do you go over and over? And that's why nobody watches you anymore. You know, you have no credibility. Please go ahead.
President Trump.
This puts me in the mind of the Bush administration, enhanced interrogation versus torture. Well, Bush just defined enhanced interrogation, knowing full well that they were effectively torturing people. Here's the second clip. This is Bukele himself, where they're asking him, hey, the Supreme Court, 9-0, a conservative court, said, bring him back. There's not been due process. The lower court's ruling was correct. Hey, Bukele, will you bring him back?
Can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed to not suggesting that I smuggle terrorists into the United States, right?
It's
I mean,
always
how can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, I mean, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
So you can release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing. I mean, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. I mean, we just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals? So
this is a preposterous premise, right? Releasing one guy who nobody has defined as being part of MS-13, short of Donald Trump himself. Bukele has taken Donald Trump's language and called him a quote-unquote terrorist. And when they point out, well, why don't you just release him? At that point, the Supreme Court said let him go. Donald Trump effectively dropped him in your country extra-constitutionally for all intents and purposes. Why don't you release him? Well, I can't do that because, it will change our dynamics in regards to El Salvador to making us unsafe by releasing this one guy who most likely wants to come back home to his family, which is where they effectively kidnapped him from. That's astonishing. He's like, this is literally a constitutional crisis where the president is blowing off the Supreme Court.
Yeah, the thing is, I don't know much about this guy. He could be a really bad guy for all we know. I don't care. If he did a specific crime, then put him on trial for the crime. If he's a member of a bad organization, maybe he's in the Hells Angels, whatever. It doesn't matter. You're allowed to join organizations. What did he do? What did he do? That's why we have courts. This reminds me of the flirtation with the right-wing dictators in Latin America under Reagan and under Bush. We're back to that era. This guy's like a Pinochet type of figure. But the thing is, he's a bad guy, in my opinion. He cleaned up his country. That's fine. That's good. Whatever. I don't know anything about it. Nevertheless, Trump could have said, okay, well, I will like put him on parole or probation, whatever. We'll drop the charges because he needs to come back. We made a mistake. He won't do that. And so it's really Trump's fault in many ways. This Bukele guy is a tool that's being used by the right wing in America because they're pissed off, excuse my language, about illegal immigrants. That's fine. A lot of people are mad about that, but that doesn't mean you crack down because guess what? You're next. It'll be for some other reason, but you'll be next.
Yeah, I think that's my issue. He's ignoring due process. Like this notion of people get their
due process is for liberals, man. That's it. That's the mentality. What the hell?
Trump didn't think that way. when they were trying to put him in a cage.
Yeah, exactly.
He didn't think that way at all. He's like,
Yeah.
I want my day in court. I can't believe these guys are going after me like this. This is outrageous. This is political prosecution, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. At least he had his day in court.
Yeah.
At least he had his day in court. In this case, Donald Trump is disappearing people, and he's doing it. It puts me in the mind of the Bush administration, like the Guantanamo Bay stuff, where it was this legal gray area where a lawyer couldn't see their clients because Guantanamo Bay is not quite in the United States, and yet Bush has the ability to throw them there. That's what this feels like. And this goes to the whole Real ID thing. And I saw your video with Ron Paul talking about the Real ID. Go into that. What is the main issue with the Real ID?
Well, the Real ID is not, as Thomas Massey pointed out, the Real ID is not creating a database. The database is already there containing your information. The Real ID is a piece of is a card that connects you with that profile you have in that database digitally, that marries you with that. And so they're saying, well, it's going to prevent another 9/11. As Thomas Massey pointed out, that's absolutely not the case, because the people who they say were in the planes flying them into buildings didn't have American passports, didn't have Real IDs, because they were from foreign countries. It's about Americans. And the problem with the Real ID, among others, first of all, as Massey himself pointed out as well, the government has no damn business knowing if that's really you on that plane. Oh, is it Jamal Thomas? No, he's using his nickname today, or he's calling himself Joe Smith today. It doesn't matter. As long as you don't go on the plane with a gun, you don't start shooting things up, you should be fine, right? It's none of the business of the government who's going on a plane or a train. But the other problem is, and we talked about this since 2005, 20 years ago, we went back and looked at a statement that we did for Dr. Paul 20 years ago when they first put it through. It doesn't stop at terrorists. That's how they start. Just like with Trump and his deportation. Oh, we're only going to deport violent people. No, it's about people like us. It's about, because they redefine terrorism too, if you remember. Oh, if you are anti-abortion. Oh, if you're a member of a gun organization. Oh, all of these things. And they can all be added to that to your profile in the database, right? And it can be used to deny you your Second Amendment rights, your First Amendment rights. What organization? It doesn't matter if you're not violent. It doesn't matter. All of these things could be in there, and they could be accessible by your future employer. Oh, Jamal Thomas. Oh, he's in like 5 gun groups, and he's screaming about abortion. I don't know if I want to hire this guy. It's a problem, So that's what it is. It's going to be used against dissidents. And that's why no president before Trump, even though the law passed in 2005, no president before Trump has enforced it until we have Kristi Noem, who is an absolute authoritarian, who is now the head of Homeland Security.
I mean, can you say that Trump, who hired her, is the authoritarian in this case? I mean, he's the one that hired her, right? The buck stops with him. He's the one that's pushing for this. He's the one that's deporting people and disappearing people out of the country. Again, he's the one that's ignoring due process. So how do we put that at no? How does that not fall to the top at Trump? And by the way, I was not one of those people that was making an argument that Trump was a fascist. From my point of view, Trump was a disfigured Republican, if that makes sense. Meaning, yeah, he was a Republican that bucked the trend on certain items, but all things being equal, he was still a Republican. He was doing Republican stuff. I mean, George Bush was doing similar things in regards to, sending people to Guantanamo Bay, and the Patriot Act passed under George Bush, even though I guess they didn't necessarily implement it until now. So from my point of view, okay, this is a progression of the presidential power in regards to the Republican Party. But this is easily on a tightrope on this notion of what is allowed under presidential powers. And for that matter, whether the president, what happens if he blows off the court? If the court holds the administration in contempt, then what?
It's a good question.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that question.
But what irritates me, at least as much as what Trump's been doing, and I'm not against Trump, but what irritates me at least as much is the fact that the opposition is so lame. We need to have a Democratic Party made up of sober people who can go beyond like keying Teslas, right? We need I don't know if you remember someone like Russ Feingold, who was in the Senate, who was a staunch civil liberties defender, people who have some stature, some intellectual stature, and are not just going down to the floor and screaming into a microphone, who can challenge him. The reason Trump can get away with all this stuff is that his opposition is so incompetent, so hysterical, so ridiculous that they're actually a parody of themselves, and they actually help make Trump's case. Look at these people. Look at these people against me. Look how they are. And the conservatives, they'll say, yeah, you're right. You know, you need a sober opposition, serious opposition in Congress who don't just hate his guts, but they oppose certain things that he does. We don't have that now. That's a real problem.
Well, that requires substance. And there is no substance on the other side. Like, I mean, let's be honest. The Democratic Party was trying to put in a censorship regime themselves in this kind of technological way where they were doing an end run around the First Amendment with what is Nina Jankowicz, where they were going after people on social media platforms in order to prevent or for that matter, inhibit certain speech, not because it was not true, but because they just didn't necessarily like it on the issues of Ukraine, on the issues of the vaccine, across the board on things that the Biden administration didn't like. They were doing this on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, etc., pushing these media networks in order to eliminate speech they didn't like. Like, so it's not just Trump, I guess is my point. When Vance goes and browbeats Europe for censorship and for overturning elections and everything else, and then comes back here and they do the exact same thing on the issue of Israel, where they're like, okay, well, we're now redefining anti-Semitism. We're redefining what it means to be allowed into the country. We're redefining what it means for free speech in the United States. That's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing. Like, so it's kind of hard to get this kind of civil liberties opposition when in many respects, they also were trying to do something very similar on the issue of shutting down speech they didn't necessarily like. They didn't go as far as disappearing people, but I do remember Eric Holder making the argument under Obama, this notion of them killing, I cannot think of his name. They killed him and his kid. And Eric Holder came out in defense, effectively saying, look, we have the executive branch has the ability to make a determination on who they can kill, meaning this notion of justice also can be applied through the executive branch. And I remember thinking, that's outrageous. What's the point of a judicial branch if the executive branch could effectively make the choice on who the president whacks? That's an American. And
well,
here we are.
it's a equal opportunity murder because I know his name. I see it in my face.
I just can't think of his name. Yeah.
But Obama killed him and his son, and then Trump got into power and killed his daughter. Okay, equal opportunity murder.
Just
you
wow.
know, and it really goes back to the idea of peace through strength. The notion of strength, and Dr. Paul did his column this week. He talks a little bit about strength. Strength isn't what people think it is. It isn't that I can bop you in the nose, you know. I mean, strength is also restraint, being serious and restraining the power that you have. And that's the part that they're missing.
They don't get that. That's not the way they think. I mean, in fact, I would argue that's not the way any American president has thought. Not in my lifetime, whether it was, that's not the way they think. When we're engaging other world leaders, we're engaging them from a position of dominance, whether we're dominant in the position or not. Donald Trump has no cards to play in Russia, short of going to nuclear war. And yet he's still like, well, I'm going to get a deal. I'm going to be the guy that gets the deal. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And there's all of this movement amounting to nothing. The tariff war, same thing, right? I'm going to put tariffs on all of the world at once, as if the U.S. has the power to effectively do this. And when China tells him to F off, and then the bond markets flip out, he has to walk it back. It's a loss. And then China continues to escalate. China hasn't moved any of its tariffs. They kept them on, and it's escalating. Well, we're not going to get beef from you anymore. We're not going to get your movies anymore. We're not going to, and you're seeing what they projected to be 3% growth, I believe, Goldman Sachs, is now 0. They're expecting a recession and potentially stagnation because we, the little people, will have to pay the tariffs while they're trying to put $20 trillion of debt on the deficit that is already at $36 trillion. It's comedic. And then they got Elon Musk and Doge out there looking for $1 trillion and going after people on Social Security and Medicaid in order to pull that $1 trillion while they're putting 20 trillion on the debt. This is what they're doing. It's just, if somebody, what time is it? If somebody pointed out to you that this was ultimately going to be what the Trump administration ended up looking like, would you have believed it would have been this cartoonish?
Well, I was optimistic, and I'm still optimistic. Things can turn around, but things are going in the wrong direction. They really are, and he's lost the plot. I think Musk is about to go. I think Musk is one of the best things about Trump. I think going through.
You think so? I think Musk is an albatross around Donald Trump's neck.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think he was the least malevolent. He wanted to go after waste. He wanted to go into the Pentagon and cut the Pentagon. And instead of cutting the Pentagon, we have a larger military budget than last year, and we wasted $1 billion bombing Yemen in 3 weeks. So it's things aren't working out well, and you don't have a legislative branch. They're asleep. They should be putting motions on the floor. They should be taking war powers resolutions to the floor, saying you can't be bombing Yemen without our approval. They're doing nothing. They're it's idiocracy. That's literally Congress. If you see some of the scenes in Idiocracy of their Congress, that's our people. F you. They literally say that now. I mean, it's crazy. It's sad. It's really.
Yeah, it breaks the corn.
I'm worried. I was worried under Biden that I would look out my window right here and see a black car come up. But I didn't know how much more worried I would be now, because speaking out, I want to send Americans over there too. I need you to build 6 more prisons because I need to put some Americans there. I'm just waiting. I'm just looking out the window, waiting.
What do you make of the Republican Congress, who seems to be okay with this, and not just okay with it, eggs it on some level? I mean, these are yes men. They're not. There's no deviation. There's no principal stand. Massey, maybe one of the rare birds who comes out and says, okay, this is outrageous. Ron Paul used to be that person who you say, okay, this is outrageous, and you can count on to kind of point out the problem with it. Rand Paul does it. Those are few and far between in regards to, meaning there is nobody, even in the Republican Party, who would stand up for the American public and say, okay, wait a minute, this is, yes, I'm part of this political party, but the president can't do that. I remember Ronald Reagan, put in quotes, right? Well, they passed the Bolin Act to prevent Ronald Reagan from effectively going to war in South America. They were willing to do it. Yes, Ronald Reagan went around it with the Iran-Contra affair, but they were willing to do it. I don't see that today. I don't see that level of courage. I don't see that level of, I guess, honest intent in regards to what they were trying to do. I mean, even if you had Democrats in the House and the Senate, it's more so aimed at Trump. It's not more so aimed at what Trump is doing. Those are different things, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, when Reagan violated the Bolin Amendment, people were genuinely shocked. He did it, and it was terrible. But people were genuinely shocked. Republicans were shocked. I don't like those communists in South America, but wow, this is heavy stuff. You're right. Aside from Thomas Massey, there's no one. This might be, here comes the cars, but Pat Buchanan said it best. Capitol Hill is Israeli occupied territory, and that's what it is. AIPAC brags. We get 90% of the people we support are elected. So that's it. When you pay for the campaigns, you get what you want. And, Miriam Adelson paid Trump, what, 100 million, 200 million, whatever.
$100 million.
You get what you paid for. The system is corrupt right now. It's corrupt to the core.
Do you think it's a tail? This could be the last question. Do you think it's the tail wagging the dog or the dog wagging the tail?
That's the $60,000 question, and I don't have an answer to that. There are a lot of theories about it. I do know that we have a problem when, on the one hand, the recent poll from Pew showed that the majority, 53% of Americans, do not support Israel.
Right.
And yet you have a Congress that is nearly 100% in absolute lockstep with everything the government of a foreign country does. That is a real problem. I mean, you're going back to like the days of Caligula when you have this kind of disconnect between the people and their government. It's a it's a bad place where we're at right now.
Yeah, but the public doesn't seem to get it.
It's got to get
Like
worse before it gets better. It has to get a lot worse, unfortunately.
This is a morbid conversation, Daniel. Necessary, right? Like, it's reality. It is what it is. But this is very morbid because what it means on some level is, we've lost control of our government. What has Ben Franklin? It's your government if you can hold on to it. Democracies aren't necessarily the easiest thing to hold on to. And in another sense, there seems to be a complete disconnect between what the public wants versus what the government provides. And it seems to be on two different tracks. And the government, regardless of the political party, doesn't quite seem to care what they offer to the public. And so you get this kind of back and forth. If you were talking about in the 90s, nobody like Trump could have gotten elected. What's wild about it is you have a Democratic Party that seems to be hell-bent on war, which I suppose you can go back to previous Democrats. I mean, either FDR, who I don't necessarily think was hell-bent on war, but kind of was. LBJ, hell-bent on war. So there were previous Democrats that were that way, but they were seen as the nanny party. And these guys are like foaming at the mouth, rabid McCarthyites. And then you get Trump, who comes in, who I don't know what to think of him on an issue of war. Obviously, he's murdering people in Yemen and doing so at the behest of Israel. Obviously, he's paying for Israel to murder as many Palestinians as he possibly can, even to the point of ethnic cleansing. And obviously, he's trying to, I don't know what he's doing in Iran. I guess he's trying to get a deal. But again, the deal isn't for the United States. Iran is no threat to the United States. The deal is on behalf of a foreign government. This is very bizarre for a government to function this way. And if you're thinking of like things like me on the left, healthcare, education, expansion of Social Security, these are things I care about. And I would argue that the public cares about and needs, nowhere to be found, not even on the left. I just find it to be an utterly bizarre situation for a government to be in. $36 trillion in debt, putting $2 trillion a year. Elon Musk and Doge is supposedly trying to find $1.5 trillion, while Republicans are going to pass a tax cut that is going to add $20 trillion to the debt. And on top of that, tariffs that they're creating, we will pay, even to the point of 25% more for pharmaceuticals. That's outrageous, but that's our government.
Dr. Paul tells a story that people ask him, do we need a third party? And he said, no, we need a second party. And I think that's where we are right now. We need a second party.
Daniel McAdams, director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. You can learn more. By the way, Daniel, where can people find you? Just so people will know, this may be out of date.
RonPaulInstitute.org is our website. The Ron Paul Liberty Report, Monday through Friday, live at noon Eastern Time. Dr. Paul and I are co-hosts.
Oh, you're about to come on. My man, thank you for this, Daniel. I really appreciate it. Always appreciate talking to you.
Take care, Jamarl.
You have a good one.
Thanks, you too.
That was a morbid presentation. That was very morbid. Look, true in the way it's being presented, but very morbid. It's morbid because there's no magical door. It's that part. There's no magical door. There's no loophole. There's no, waving a wand. And it's like, oh, you can see your way out. I see no way out. There is no political opposition from the Democrats. They are a worthless trash party, from my point of view. And part and parcel to the reason that I didn't support them, that I go so hard at Democrats, because from my point of view, if anything is going to get accomplished, it has to take place from the standpoint of the left. I have no expectations of anything happening from the right. They don't believe these things. They don't believe in government working for the benefit of the public in that way. They believe in doing exactly what they're doing right now. How much money can we shuffle into the hands of the rich and the 1%, which is what they're doing. They're doing a cash grab. We're going to put $20 trillion on the debt. We're going to use voodoo mathematics to make it not look like $20 trillion, while simultaneously claiming that we care about the deficit. That is what they're doing. And racking up money in tariffs that we pay. Your drugs, more expensive. Your tomatoes, more expensive. Your eggs, more expensive. Your groceries more expensive. Your electronics more expensive. All of these things are more expensive, not by an act of God, but by policy that is outrageous. And yet, that is our government. It's not, and then to make the argument, well, we're going to bring industries back into the United States. Who's going to do it? Who's going to do it? Meaning, you are talking about a decade, if not longer, process. And in that process, people paying more for those items while you go about trying to do that. That's assuming you can even do it. And that's assuming those companies would even come back over into the US, because it still may be cheaper, even with the tariffs, for them to maintain production wherever their production is. Trump is going to be dead or out of office in a few years. And there's no reason to believe that the next president is going to maintain those policies. So you are just hurting Americans. It is a class war against the poor. That's all it is. And so, for whatever these gyrations that are taking place in the Trump administration on these issues, the reality of it is we are being hurt. My family is being hurt. Your family are the ones that are effectively being hurt and damaged as a direct result of what Donald Trump is doing. And keep in mind, all of this is happening while simultaneously potentially going to war with Iran. There's that. And potentially, or they will come up with a budget that gives themselves massive tax cuts. He is going to cause stagflation, at the very least a recession, and we will all suffer as a result of what Donald Trump is doing. And that doesn't even get to the civil liberties issues of disappearing people into foreign countries in this George Bush-esque Guantanamo Bay stuff, where he's using that goofball Bukele in order to put people in his shitty jails. It's amazing. And yet, this is our political system. This is what we've devolved into. And no, if you're asking me, Kamala Harris, would she have been better? She would have been just as bad in a different way. Whereas Donald Trump is at the very least making overtures of peace with Russia. And I hold out the slimmest of hope that he comes up with some overarching deal that they are discussing and that they're making progress on. Whatever that deal is, I have no idea what that particular deal is, but whatever it is, this overarching deal that interacts Russia and the US in a way that precludes any kind of military conflict between the countries, with Ukraine being one of the items that are solved as they come up with this particular deal. Harris would not have done that. Harris would have continued the war in Gaza. She would have just kept arming Israel, just like Donald Trump is doing. I have a hard time believing she would have said anything against Gaza, considering she wasn't willing to say anything on the campaign trail. And in the case of Russia, kept puttering away with you for as long as it take, up until the point of a potential nuclear war. So there is no way out. There is no magical door. Door number one, nuclear war. Door number two, disappearing people and just a clown car in regards to the way government is being run and damaging directly to all of us. There is no way out. That's morbid. I don't mean to be morbid. I'm just pointing out that is where we are. Somebody said they believe in miracles. Cherie, I don't. Anything that happens is natural, unfortunately, Cherie. I don't. Let's go to the comments. Mr. Riffley, Patrick says, when he says the US can print money, one reason for the tariffs is that the dollar's status as a national currency is going away. That's the other interesting part. By using the dollar in this way, we may damage the dollar. That's the other thing. The US is the world's reserve currency. Because we're the reserve currency, we've been able to have unfunded wars. If you remember when George Bush was in office, George Bush did the Iraq War through deficit spending. So you didn't have to raise taxes. You didn't have to make people pay more for the war. You just printed money. Think of what you could do if you could just print money. If I could just print $10 trillion, how many wars can I have with $10 trillion? Hell, why not $20 trillion? How many wars can I have with $20 trillion? But instead, using deficit spending to get tax cuts. Think about that shit. That's mind fuck, right? We are going to go into debt as a country in order to give rich people who already have most of the money even more money. That's what we're going to do as a country. That's who we elected. I am not inclined to believe that Harris might not have even given a tax cut herself, right? But that is a mind fuck. When other countries point that out, that recently there was the Chinese embassy that pointed out, you guys are number one in, health issues, number one in, or worse in school. Like they were going through this list of the number one stuff. We shouldn't be this way. This is an anomaly. Like this is an anathema to what we should be as a country. And yet this seems to be where we are. It's super bizarre. It's super bizarre. It is super, super bizarre. Right here. Margarita J. So continue with unfair trade. Everyone but China is ready to renegotiate. Is that true? Everyone but China? China has been going around working with other countries. The European Union has put off any sort of negotiation, put off any sort of tariff themselves in retaliation to the United States. My argument is not the tariffs are unreasonable. My argument is that the way Donald Trump is doing it is a clown car. And again, how many people want to pay additional taxes, which is effectively what you will be paying under these tariffs? The idea that we pay more for drugs than any other country around the planet. And Trump's response to this is, I'm going to put a 25% tariff on drugs. We are going to pay them. If you need insulin, you're going to pay for the insulin, regardless of what the price is. If you need some kind of medication for cancer, you're going to pay for the medication for cancer. Doesn't matter what the price is. Meaning you're over a barrel. You're paying more for something that you can't necessarily do without because your life is at stake if you do it without it. I'm saying that is outrageous. It's one thing if you target tariffs to cover specific industries. Okay, I want to protect this industry, so I'm going to target tariffs in this particular sector in order to protect. Okay, that's one thing. That is a thought out process of how you go about, let's say, protecting one industry in order to make a more balanced relationship. That's not what he's doing. Let's be very clear. That margarita is not what he's doing. It's a clown car. There was a reason that Trump had to back away from the stove because he's incompetent. I'm sorry, he's incompetent. Just pointing it out. U.S. healthcare already is unaffordable. Yes, which is kind of my point. Which is exactly kind of my point. Let's see. Anastasia Beaverhausen. China is a power player here, not the United States. So that's the rub. We get so much stuff from China that we can't do without it. Whereas they can get their stuff from other places. So when China is offloading US dollars, okay, there's one thing. When China decides, okay, well, we're not taking your beef. Okay, well, what does that do to the cattle industry in the United States? The last time around when China said, well, we're not taking your soybeans. Okay, well, what did that do to the farmers? Donald Trump had literally give farmers money to keep those farmers going because he so screwed up things in an economic sense. If you're gonna have a trade war, you better damn well win it. And the reality of it is, this is not winning. None of this is winning. All of these are failures. These are losses. These are losses. Shit sniffs. We're already being behind Russia, but we're definitely behind China. We're losing the war in Ukraine in a military sense. We are going to lose this economic war with China in an economic sense. And in doing so, potentially damage this country in a way I don't think we've seen in our lifetime. I could be wrong. God knows. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. Adelaide, I have a Chinese Australian cousin who is very well known Australian. Okay. Shout out to you and your cousin. Green, go home. Rod C. Rod C. Cherie, one more time. Thomas Carrot and Salt Cube Analytics. Okay. I have no idea what that is. I don't know what the conversation is going on in the chat, but fair enough. I mean, look, I guess my point is very plain. I don't want anybody that I care about to be damaged by what is taking place. And if Donald Trump, who, by the way, got elected on an economic platform because he was going to do better with the economy, according to all of these people who effectively voted for him, ends up causing a depression, all of us suffer. And any depression that takes place in the United States is effectively a world depression. I can show you the clip where, I forget the guy's name, is effectively coming out saying as much, saying the reorganization that is trying to take place, what Donald Trump is trying to do this stuff on a dime, may create economic eddies that fundamentally damage the way we operate as a country economically going forward. And if you look at the indicators, part of the reason that Donald Trump backed away from the stove is because the stove was hot. And the people around him and the other billionaires and the plutocrats around him was telling him such. So there is that. Let me see, one more story. I got to be honest, the deportation story is terrifying. It's terrifying. The notion that you are effectively disappearing people in the United States, a country that prides itself on the First Amendment and prides itself on this idea of due process of law, and you decide that stuff doesn't matter. That stuff doesn't matter. That's a big deal. Oh, Witkoff. So Witkoff has been doing these commercials. And, you know, I pointed out before that there's a skew in the Trump administration in regards to people like Kellogg, who effectively, I assume, wants to keep the war going because any common sense will tell them that Russia is not going to accept any terms where the European troops are in Ukraine. Those people are going to be targets. He's already said this is a non-starter for me. They don't trust us already. So any deal that looks like it's going that way is going to be a fail. On the other front, Witkoff, who's like, give up the 4 regions. Now, we do not have a readout of the conversation between Witkoff and Putin. We know that conversation was 5.5 hours, which means that is a lot of talking to not have a readout after the fact. And it continues a conversation that effectively were being had over the course of the last few times between the teams. This is Witkoff coming out talking about his conversations with Putin on Fox News. Now, again, I suppose he's not going to let the bag out of the hat. Is that right? Cat out of the bag in regards to what they talked about. But I do want to hear.
Okay.
I haven't heard this clip yet, but here's Witkoff.
And will the deal include things that maybe are out of the box that people aren't thinking about now? I would imagine Vladimir Putin probably would want to be in business with the U.S. and with Europe. Is that a potential that could come out of this?
There's no doubt about it. I mean, this peace deal is about these so-called 5 territories, but there's so much more to it. There's security protocols. There's you know, no NATO, Article 5. I mean, it's just, you know, a lot of detail attached to it. It's a complicated situation, from, you know, rooted in you know, some real problematic things happening between the 2 countries. And I think we might be on the verge of something that would be very, very important for the world at large. On top of that, I believe there's a possibility to reshape the Russian-United States relationship through some very compelling commercial opportunities that I think give real stability to the region too. Partnerships create stability.
Well,
Now, Arnaud said exactly that. If you remember when Arnaud was on the show, he said, look, it sounds like that they are developing financial relationships and entanglements financially that creates a certain degree of stability because of the financial relationships. Basically, if you had $10 trillion on the line, okay, maybe you don't want to fight. Maybe those financial relationships create, if not friendships, something that keeps you from being at each other's throats going forward. Now, his point is, look, we think we may be on the verge of a redefining the relationship between the United States and Russia. Good. I don't want to be at odds with anybody. Now, the catch becomes, what does this mean for the relationship between Russia, China, and Iran and BRICS? Okay, well, those are sacrosanct. Those aren't going anywhere. So whatever relationship that the United States is able to forge with Russia on this, in some respect, cannot affect relationships going on with China and the other countries. They don't trust us. By the same token, if they can create business relationships, I would imagine Russia is open for business. And they're perfectly okay with being open for business. I think the interesting part to this is Europe. Europe is freaking out right now. And if the United States and Russia forge some kind of economic bond, and in the context of that economic bond has Ukraine as part of it, what does it mean for Europe? How does Europe balk at that when two superpowers effectively come together and say, all right, we have business relationships. This is what we're going with going forward. Now, the catch becomes, how do you get the UN Security Council with these same European powers to sign off that those regions are part of Russia? How do you get them to sign off that NATO doesn't expand? How do you get them to do that? Now, I think Mark would say you don't. I think from Mark's point of view, there is no way that A, Europe will sign off on it, or B, an American president can countenance it. I suppose we will see. Witkoff, at the very least in that interview, seems optimistic in the conversations that he's been having. And truth be told, if it was just the US and Russia with Donald Trump at the helm as a business guy, Trump may be open to these business relationships. It is a masterstroke to send Kirillov to DC to have these conversations with the various people talking to Trump in the language that Donald Trump speaks. That is a masterstroke. You could have sent Lavrov, but Lavrov is not necessarily a business guy. He's a diplomat. Kirillov goes that he's having conversations about business. This is the business we could do. Really? Yes. You can have all of this business in Russia. We can have all of these relationships. We can have all of these mineral rights. We could exploit the Arctic. We could do this. We could do that. We could do all of these things. We just need to forge some kind of deal. In which case, I would imagine Trump ears perks up. I would imagine his ears perks up. I would imagine the people that Kirillov talk to ears perk up. And it makes them that much more open to doing business, which is part and parcel to the reason why I suspect Witkoff is sitting here effectively saying, hey, we may be on the verge of a new norm going forward. I am super curious about what this means for Europe. Oh, I am super curious. If the US and Russia eventually come out and present a deal to the world, this is what we've come up with. This is what we've agreed upon. And we are willing to sign on the dotted line about these things. And in being willing to sign on the dotted line about these things, we're going to push our proxy into accepting something. Maybe Zelensky is not at the helm at that point, but we're pushing them to do something. How does Europe say no? And more to the point, does Europe fracture with that relationship? I mean, you already have Hungary and Slovakia, who are the outliers. Italy has already said they want to have a relationship with the United States, which effectively bucks the trend in regards to Germany, the UK, and France. Will there be other countries that also buck the trend and say, look, I don't want our businesses to go belly up. I want Russian gas because it's cheaper and it's more stable. Do you get a fracturing of Europe as a direct result of some kind of relationship between the US and Russia, if indeed a relationship is forged in some kind of economic sense that creates this kind of militaristic stability in the region and redefines the relationship between the United States and Russia? It's fascinating. It's completely fascinating. I suppose we'll see. Wickoff could be above his skis, but who knows? Sir Mike Salat, a soybean farmer in Missouri put up pro-Biden signs and big ones along US 36. That's what happened. Okay, why did they do that? Why did they do that? If indeed, as some people on this channel believe, that Donald Trump is fighting for the working man and Donald Trump is fighting for US interests, then why are the farmers freaking out? Why? It's because you started a trade war, and a trade war where you thought that everybody was effectively going to bend the knee, and China told you to F off. And not just F off, escalated their activity. So whereas Donald Trump had to back away, China kept going after beef, going after movies, we're doing, we may reposition our products. We may get our soybeans from Brazil as opposed to getting them from the United States. Oh, sorry, farmers in the US, the 1.3 billion people that you would have had access to, you no longer have access to. What does that do? That puts your farmers on welfare, which is effectively what it is when the Trump administration has to give farmers money to keep them in business because of the way the tariffs have adversely affected them, or let's say the trade war has adversely affected them. This was shambolic. This was shambolic. Thank you for that, Sir Mike Salat. Thank you. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. I get it, right? Cherie has a message for you. Where's Cherie's message? I didn't see it. Right here. How is James Baldwin and Gore Vidal connected? Great debates. I don't know. I've seen a few of James Baldwin's debates. I saw one with him and Malcolm X that was just fantastic. I didn't see the one between him and Gore Vidal. I saw the one between him and William F. Buckley that was held at Oxford. That was fantastic. In fact, that was my introduction to James Baldwin. I heard him speak for the first time, and I was sitting there thinking to myself, oh my God. Just like, oh my God. It's the way he speaks. It's not direct. It's, at least not all of the speeches. At least I didn't interpret it that way. I felt like he was going around a bend, and then when the point was made, everything else was tied together to the main point in a way that was startling and ever present, that everybody at the place could get on a gut level. It was an astonishing presentation. So I haven't seen the one with Gore Vidal. I'm going to have to look that one up. Mexico was food producer. What is this one? Mexico was food producer, self-sufficient until Anglos imposed their abusive North American free trade agreement, NAFTA, damned green dope. So that was under Bill Clinton, right? Where Bill Clinton passed NAFTA saying that it was going to be fantastic and ended up creating all sorts of issues. Yeah. Let's see. Out of R, these things are like mouths to complete. What is this? 6 yay fool. Yeah, fool me once. Fool me once, can't fool me twice. I mean, look, the reality of it is Trump got elected. And you have to ask yourself, what was the opposition if Trump got elected? Right? It wasn't like Trump was running unopposed. It wasn't like he was the only person that was on the ballot. 320 million people looked both up and down. They found one lacking, and they put in somebody who I would argue was obviously incompetent. But they did so. And when he got in, I thought to myself, I think I might have even said it. He's not my president, or I didn't vote for him, but he's my president, and I hope he does well. We are less than 100 days in, and within 100 days, we're in a trade war. He has been threatening Iran with an overwhelming attack that has been echoed by some people who purportedly are in independent media and are independent, as they call themselves. And on top of echoing this attack, he's been bombing and killing civilians in Yemen and arguing that the bombing in Yemen has somehow decimated Yemeni forces while Yemen is continuing firing shots in the Red Sea and firing shots at Israel, the only group that has taken on the mantle of trying to stop a literal genocide. Not to mention damaging Americans. And with the tax cuts that he's trying to effectively pass for the rich, meaning this is a shambolic administration that is even to the point of ignoring civil liberties, disappearing people in prisons outside of the United States, and is openly talking about wanting to do the same thing to Americans who were grown and born in America. Less than 100 days. Hasn't even been 100 days. And yes, in Gaza. In the way that Joe Biden effectively was given 70 to 80% of the money to Israel in order to murder and kill Palestinians for Israel to go and invade other countries, Trump is doing the exact same thing. And let's be very clear, Donald Trump's antagonism towards Iran has nothing to do with the United States, meaning he's doing this on behalf of a foreign country and going after the First Amendment rights of Americans on behalf of a foreign country. This is not America first. This is an Israel first president. And he seems to wear that badge proudly. This is not in our interests. Now, the question with the Iranian thing comes, will Israel be happy with any deal that Donald Trump makes with Iran, considering they want him to wage war on Iran? And I would imagine there's a huge amount of agitation within the Trump administration that is perfectly willing and perfectly wants him to do it. Consequences be damned for the rest of the world. Now, these consequences, let's be very clear, will be monstrous. They will be monstrous. And yet, that's what he's agitating. That's what he's agitating. So I will make a prediction. He will lose either the House or the Senate or both. I don't know what Democrats are going to do when they get in, because from my understanding, they haven't necessarily changed anything. But just for how chaotic the Trump administration has been up to this point, Trump is going to lose massive amount of points. He's already lost like 8 points since the tariffs went into play. There will not be a reassuring of businesses in the time frame that Donald Trump is in office, if ever at all, just because of what it would take to do it. And this idea of American workers in factories. What's funny, there was a poll out that asked Americans, hey, is America better off if it has an industrial base? Like meaning we have factories. It was like 70 to 80% said yes. And then they said, would you want to work in a factory? And it was like 20% said yes. So as long as somebody else is working in a factory, we're all for it. We're all for it. So what does that mean for bringing factories and bringing these industries back into the United States? Now, at one point, his Commerce Secretary, it's not a Commerce Secretary, I forget the guy's name, Lednick, was making his argument that robots would do the job, because I think Lednick on some level understood that human beings in America may not necessarily want a factory job, considering factories have not necessarily been a part of our ethos for a very long time. But if you are having a war, the thing that won the Second World War, yes, it was the Soviet Union, but also this notion of America industrial might, where we could put these militaries on two sides of the globe and still supply the home front. That is an astonishing feat of industrial might. That is not us today. And if they are living in that mindset, then they are going to get us into a whole lot of trouble, be it Democrats or Republicans. And I strongly suspect to you or oppose to you that the Ukraine war is just one tipping point this economic war that Trump had to back away from is another canary in the coal mine. Do they get the hint? From my point of view, the answer is no, they do not. I'm going to end this. You guys are phenomenal. I really appreciate all of you. We had a really good crowd today. So what's said just turns out. And we will be here together, whatever happens, however it turns out, we'll be in it together. I want to thank all of you for joining me. This is the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I want to give a shout out to the chat in this. So Mike Sawat, shout out to you. Thank you very much for the chat. Mr. Ripley, shout out to you. Thank you very much for the chat. I want to thank my guests who came on the show, Patrick, Diane McAdams. There was one more, the guy in the middle. Who's the guy in the middle? Who's the guy in the middle? Arnaud, Develay. Love talking to Arnaud. He easy to talk to. He's very easy to talk to. He lives there, so he can give you this kind of sense of what is the zeitgeist on the ground. What are they talking about in Moscow in regards to the issues that are taking place, as opposed to what are they necessarily talking about here? Considering that, this is what's happening. Arnaud's sentiment is very similar to Witkoff's. Sentiment is very similar to Witkoff's. So I will end this. I'm going to say like, share, subscribe. You guys are fantastic. The notion that you can sit here and listen to domestic and international politics at 7 a.m. in the morning is an impressive thing. Most people need their coffee before they even get their brains working. And you guys are here listening to the news, doing the news. I appreciate all of you for that. We are nearly at 50,000. We are very close to that tipping point. I may have a fantastic guest for you tomorrow. In fact, let me check his email. I have a fantastic guest for you tomorrow. Alex Craner is going to be on the show tomorrow. He is an economist. I think a lot of your audience and outside the USA, Jamal, Andrea Dickman, appreciate that. Appreciate that. Wake up on the West Coast at 2:30. So yeah, what? Are you serious? 2:30 in the morning. You are a troubadour, sir. You are a giant. Alex Craner is going to be here 7:15 tomorrow morning. And it is a perfect person to have. This interplay between economics and foreign policy, he's the guy for that. So that is the conversation we're going to have with him tomorrow morning. That should be fantastic. So I would definitely see you guys bright and early in the morning. Guys, have a fantastic evening. Jamal Thomas, Morning Show. I'm signing off. Have a good one all.